Hello. Hi, Brinda.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. We've gone live and we'll just be pulling up a video.
I know the audio is not playing.
Yes, just a second.
The curriculum is a year-long writing program. By the end of the year, you would have acquired the skills and competencies of writing policy memos, short proposals, and very many things that are needed in the field of development. You will interact with social activists, with people from the corporate world, range of political leaders, social leaders, to make a true contribution to social purpose organizations and the development sector.
The course that we're doing right now, it's a workshop on participatory approaches and methods. So this is about how you can engage the community, create the conditions for them to be able to participate in decision making and in the planning. A lot of those methods are visual methods. So this workshop is about teaching students on how to actually use those techniques, but also understanding what actual participation is. We're going to be doing a program, a district immersion program called Realizing India, where they spend 2 weeks in the district, and we're hoping that they will use some of these tools and techniques in the districts with communities that they will be engaging with.
The pedagogy is something, it is I think very different from what we are used to, which is very unidirectional. We are involved in a lot of steps, so it's not that just the faculty is deciding that they will be delivering a lecture on this, and we are being asked to give constant feedbacks as to how we can implement it in our daily life, and we have these plenaries where we try to make sense of all that is happening. So all this is something very unique to this program.
Along with the courses, there'll be courses that will also focus on personal development, personal mastery. Even if you're doing a course on management, that student gets to design their own project, and then they get to know, oh, this is how I will be managing it. So that I factor comes in, and the personal touch that comes in every course, that connectivity is very unique.
For those youngsters who are more enlightened, who are more courageous and brave, we have an institution that you can go to, derive support from, and be inspired by. And that's what's exciting about joining ISDM.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome from Indian School of Development Management to Target 2030, What Matters? Dialogues on Development Management for Sustainable Development Goals. This summit is being organized as part of the Development Management Day celebrations. One of ISDM's goals is to evangelize development management. And towards this, we celebrate Development Management Day, or DM Day, every year on the last Friday of January. This year, the summit is focusing on 3 key themes: talent, diversity, and philanthropy, and how they matter in our shared quest to achieve Target 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals. We've had some very engaging and insightful discussions about why talent matters, how India's demographic dividend can be leveraged for enhancing social capital, and the CEO talks over the last 2 days, yesterday evening and today. Later today, we would discuss and explore further on the themes diversity matters and philanthropy matters. I would now like to invite and welcome ISDM founder and president, Mr. Ravi Sridharan, to share his reflections on where is ISDM today on its 6th birthday. Over to you, Ravi. Ravi, I think you're on mute.
I hope you can see my screen, Aseem.
Yes, I can see it, Ravi.
All right. Thank you so much, Aseem. And I'll do this really quickly. For some of you who may not be very familiar with ISDM, ISDM is really on a journey to building a world-class management school for the development sector. And we've been on this journey now for 6 years. And I'm seeing why my screen is not moving. Yeah, we've been around for 6 years and we're going strong. It is really one of its kind, sort of, if we may call pioneering institution in the world, founded in 2016 and aims to develop and establish the theory and practice of development management. So it's very much in the, in the ecosystem creation space, in the category creation space. And, it's sort of captured in the vision of ISDM, which is to create a vibrant and catalytic ecosystem for development management across the world. In these pandemic times, which have been the worst, we've all seen in our lifetime, the team at ISDM, have planned, invested, and worked really, really hard to come out much stronger. And it's an amazing thing to say, considering that the pandemic hit us when we were 2.5 to 3 years old. But today we are much stronger than we were when the pandemic started. ISDM is now set with a clear strategy and plans, excellent people, and very good momentum for building a truly world-class, iconic institution of management for the social sector. Some of the big pivots that we made in the last year, we redesigned the PGP curriculum and onboarded a list of really eminent faculty from India and abroad. We defined a strategic operating plan with laser-sharp focus on what we will do for the next 3 to 5 years. We commenced work on what we are calling a digital-first institution, where everything we do is significantly led by the digital front, established a high-achieving, very sort of coveted leadership team, and a very high-performing team, across the organization. Almost 2/3 of the organization have been, sort of handpicked to join the team in the last 1 year. We have strategy and plans in place for engaging with individuals and organizations in the sector and strengthening their ability to adopt management practices and become professionally led social purpose organizations. To do all this in the last 1 year, we significantly increased our fundraising efforts. And, we're fortunate to say that in the last 1 year, we raised as much funds as we raised in the first 5 years of our life. And something we're very proud of, and we'll talk a bit about today, is setting up centers of excellence, which is essentially trying to build concentration on specific areas, knowledge areas in development management. And just quickly run through some of those highlights. We have a leadership team that's got a phenomenal background, great experience, come with tremendous passion. We have Aseem, Deeksha, Kanwaljit, and Trisha, who are leading programs, people management, digital, and the Global Knowledge Hub, who we are very proud to have as part of the leadership team. We have a stellar board of advisors, people like Ashish Dhawan, Harsh Mariwala, Shadadera Vidya Shah, Professor Shiv Kumar, who you will hear in just a minute, Pravas Sinha, who I would call, the father of modern higher education in this country, and Shikha Kapoor. We have some eminent faculty, just, a sample of the names. We have people like Professor Kenvin Smith from UPenn. We have Professor Rishikesha from IIM Bangalore. We have Suman Srivastava, who used to be a CEO of an advertising agency, Dr. Monica Sharma, who works on leadership with presidents and CEOs across the globe. We're fortunate to get some funding from really good partners, and these are our institutional partners that we've been involved with. You'll hear a little more about Ford Foundation and the work we're doing with them today. Individuals, some really respected individuals like Ashish Dhawan, Sanjeev Pichchandani, Amit Chandra, Ravi Thakra, Rohit Kapoor. These are all really big names in the space of philanthropy, and we're really fortunate to have all of them supporting us. Just quickly looking at the years ahead, ISDM will become an iconic power brand, become a fountainhead of knowledge, engage extensively with organizations, build a really inspiring team, and attract and inspire youth to join this sector, build a cadre of development management professionals who will go out and lead social purpose organization. And we're doing all this so that development management becomes mainstream. Masters in development management is widely recognized and acceptable. Today, the concept really doesn't exist. Social purpose organizations, this is a word ISDM has created. So it's not about for-profit or not-for-profit or government or non-government. It's about social purpose organizations. They'll recognize the need and impact of development management. SPOs will become professionally run and have a far greater sustained impact and look very, very different. And the idea why do we want all that to happen? To enable billions more to come out of poverty, deprivation, and all sorts of things that really ought not to be happening in a civilized society like ours, and to be living in a planet that is just going to be there for the future generations and future generations to enjoy. There are some 3 strategic priorities. I told you about the laser sharp focus we have. Our PGP is our flagship program, and that's going to have students, and we hope we'll attract some of the brightest minds to come and study here. The Global Knowledge Hub, we'll talk more about it, is to do with creating the knowledge ecosystem for development management. And the strategic capacity building, or SCB as we call it, and we'll hear about that too today, is about engaging with individuals, organizations, and specific segments that make a big difference. This is really the focus. But to make that happen, and these 3 strategic initiatives, we have some things to back it up. One is I told you about being a digital first institution, about building an iconic brand that becomes inspirational for the sector, for youngsters to want to join, for organizations to hire, and build partnerships where we bring together social, intellectual, and financial capital to build this iconic first of its kind institution in this country. We have a dream of building a campus, and this is really a designer's representation of what our imagination of our campus will be. And I'm putting it up there only to show we want development sector to start looking very different. We want the image to move from a chola wala to a laptop wala, because we believe we should use the latest inventions of mankind, humankind, to work for the betterment of society, not just for big businesses to make money. To do all this, we plan to raise somewhere in the region of 175 to 200 crores over the next 2 years. And this will be invested over the next 5 years, the kind of thing we'll be building a leadership team, the digital architecture, getting a campus, centers of excellence, and we're spreading it out over the next 5 years. So we've already started this journey in 2021, and we'll take it all the way to 2025. We believe that we would have really hit a certain level of, where we want to get to by 2025. And really the belief is that, this work that we are doing, just to remind you, it was 200 crores I talked about, the impact of development management could be a multi-bagger effect, where the development sector, which spends 80,000 crores every year of philanthropic money, can have a multiplier effect. But even a 1% increase in the impact is worth 800 crores and soon over 1,000 crores. Really want to thank all of you for all the support, wishes that ISDM has received, and look forward to building a first of its kind institution in the country that has a global influence. Thank you so much, and back to you, Asim.
Thank you, Ravi. Let's now welcome the anchor for the next session, which is on diversity matters, Ms. Priyanka Gupta. Priyanka leads this strategic capacity building vertical at ISDM. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Asim, and a very good evening to all of you. I'm your host for the segment Diversity Matters. A visionary, Kofi Annan, once said, "Gender equality is more than a goal in itself. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. Diversity matters." The first line describing Goal 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals says, "Gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. And therefore, diversity matters." This segment is dedicated towards highlighting and discussing the critical need to respect and encourage gender diversity to attain a progressive and equitable world. We are honored to have a lineup of extremely diverse speakers to grace the event today and discuss how we as individuals and organizations play an integral role towards ensuring diversity in all aspects of our existence, leading to a sustainable development. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, we have a keynote address on the diversity imperatives for a progressive and equitable world, followed by a panel discussion and the launch of Women on Boards program. Once again, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. It's my privilege to invite the keynote speaker for Diversity Matters, Ms. Brinda Saroop. Ms. Saroop has defied all odds to reach the highest echelons of Indian bureaucracy, a domain that seems to be otherwise dominated by men. Ms. Saroop is a retired IS officer of the 1981 batch who has served as secretary to the Government of India in departments such as school education and literacy, food and public distribution. Ms. Saroop has worked in the sector of education for over 23 years, both at the central and state governments, as an implementer and a policy maker. She, in her service as Secretary, Food and Public Distribution, has been involved with automation of public distribution and procurement systems, among many other things. Ms. Saroop continues to be associated with organizations and initiatives in the space of education and food security. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Brinda Saroop for her keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Priyanka, and thank you, ISDM, for giving me this opportunity to be amongst all of you today. When I sat down with Priyanka and Ravi, I think the context which I understood was that we look at diversity, and especially in the context of, women in leadership or women in management roles, and to put it together, women on boards, which is an increasing phenomena in India. So in this context, I thought I'd share a few thoughts with you and a few ideas, which I think diversity in its gender dimension is perhaps one of the most significant areas where in social change or in social development is a very critical input. So taking on from that, when we look at women in leadership, whether I take it in the context of large public service systems, say the civil service, which carries on the tasks of the government, which are huge and multiple and widespread. And we look at the corporate sector, where increasingly women are playing critical roles in boards, in management, as CEOs and so on. And also to look at the nonprofit sector, which already has a very large presence of women, and where women in leadership have a fairly significant presence. So what is it that makes this gender dimension important in such scenarios? And more importantly, one asks oneself, what is it that women bring to the table? The government has in the recent past made it mandatory to have women on boards. And for someone like me, who has spent most of my time in a professional career with the government, as a policymaker, as an implementer of social sector programs, social change, managing social change. And now increasingly after retirement, I get exposed more and more to the corporate world, which needs women on its boards. And then I ask myself, what do I do there? Or what do people like me do there? Is it optics? Is it something more substantive? I get increasingly, post-retirement, I'm working with the nonprofit sector and find that there is a significant role there too. So what is it that we need to bring to the table as women or as gender sensitive men that will make a difference and make us contribute? And I was actually quite delighted that in this forum, of your institution, but also the fact that you train and you develop partners and players in the world of social development, which is so very dear to my heart. So this is a privilege to be with you. So what do women bring to the table? What is the significance of it? Why should we be there? What is it that we can give? And so I've tried to break it down into 3-4 aspects, which I think are critical and which enable a very positive, socially purposeful slant to the contribution. And I think one of those things is also the personal attributes that we bring to the table, women bring to the table. And the reason I say this is because, you hear buzzwords like empathy and they're more inclusive and so on and so forth. But those are, very predictable textbook pronunciations. But really, if you reflect, the women, by the time they get into leadership positions, have a huge experience, their own struggles, their own way of negotiating, their own way of risk-taking, their own way of managing conflict. So there are many dimensions that you progress, especially in our country, in a patriarchal-driven system, where you pick up these enormous attributes, which actually get strengthened when you get into professional life also. And these are some things which you increasingly bring to the table in all your work life and in all those decision makings that you have to push. It's not something which is strident. In some cases it is, in some cases it is not. But I think by the very sheer experience of life, women are able to bring these attributes and be able to coalesce them into management and their role in various jobs and assignments that they give, which actually contribute to a better and a more sensitized management system. So suddenly these words like empathy, inclusiveness, a general attitude which is fair and let's give all those who have not had it so good a chance, is something which they absorb and they're able to reflect in their work life and in their management styles. And I think this is what women continue to bring on board in assignments which are of a very high and demanding order, or in more reflective fora in the management systems that they populate. So I think one of these, so clearly that these are exceptional people who bring in a lot of experience of a different kind, of a different worldview onto the table. The second, I think, aspect which is important, I find, is we may call it optics, but positions and positionings have a message. And those messages, when you have, let's say, 10% or 20% women in the civil services, or you have, about 14% women on boards, whatever the statistics may be. But I think this matters because it is reflective of a balance, that there is a conscious effort to bring in different points of view. There are extremely reassuring factors when you have, let's say, an increasingly large workforce of women in the nonprofit, even for-profit sectors, even in corporations, even in some business and industry, and definitely in much of the underbelly and the activities of governments. So a governance model which reflects a diverse pattern where women are there, women have a voice, women are playing roles, it's reassuring downstream to each and everybody. And by that, I don't mean the women feel only heartened by it, they certainly do, but also anybody who has not had it so good and who feels that glass ceilings are being broken. It's a reassuring, it's a balancing act, it helps aspirations, it helps innovations, it helps self-confidence. So I think optics matters, and even though some of us say that there's a mechanical inclusion of women in boards is something which may work, may not work, but I think it matters because in the long run, these aspects make a difference in the perception of the whole organization. Thirdly, I think it is also a role which women play in management, in senior levels, in leadership positions, where they give voice. And that is perhaps the biggest stake that they bring to the table. They give voice to, as I said, different perceptions. Women's worldview brings in many more dimensions of management or management tools or vision or aspirations, which are slightly different from the conventional. And they negotiate that space on these leadership positions, as I have had to perhaps negotiate many things in where there was this mindset which had to be changed. So we negotiate. We are all the time negotiating, and we know it's not that we are flying off the handle or we are getting strident. We are actually in a mature position to bring these voices onto the table or these viewpoints onto the table. So I think what is articulated, what it helps people to understand and expand their whole approach to a position, and especially in development administration, that is, I think, the most valuable contribution that women bring to a table. And no matter where you are, whether you are working in a district level or whether you are at the highest echelons of the central government trying to move things, or you are with an NGO who's working very dedicatedly to move education indicators in some corner of India, it is equally vital at all stages that that voice must be heard. And I think that's the God-given right which is given to women when they reach such positions or are able to make a difference. And that is where I think the strongest strength of these positions lies. But I also think in terms of, is this a role which women just take to? Of course, most of them do it with great deal of proficiency because they have their whole experience in that organization behind them. They have their own struggles, their own ways of having got ahead with many of these hurdles. But that is not to say it is all. And I realize this increasingly, that training, no matter what phase of life you are in or what phase of your professional life you are in, there will always be something that you could do better. And in today's world, I think those opportunities do exist where we can constantly keep this part going with much more professional help. And therefore, compliments to ISDM to have started a course of how do you equip women to do better on boards. And I think this is essential. And I take my own example. I mean, in the IS, there is no discrimination in a certain sense that you are all trained alike, you all are merit-based, there are no concessions to you, and you just have to do it on your own. And whereas that is a great theory, there are many times when women have felt in the service that we needed just a little bit more of information, just a little more knowledge about pitfalls, where we have been thrust into a world where this total patriarchal domination, women have been there before us, women will come after us, but maybe there was something else we could have been primed to do better. And there were opportunities where these networks finally developed and made us much more confident in being able to negotiate many things in our professional lives. But I think training, therefore, is something which is vital, which is continuous, and for which fora like yours and many others should continuously be able to build that, build those familiarities with governance patterns, changing governance patterns, participative patterns, which will give more confidence to that role that women expect to play in these institutions and these organizations. And so therefore, I think that preparation is extremely important. The second, I think, which always helps is to be able to get information, data on many variables which help to strengthen a gender perspective, which help with the nuances of the organization, which help you to actually be able to demonstrate change, which some of your ideas might have pushed through, and where the gender dimension needs to be firmly buttressed. So information, data, again, today technology, equips us to reach out to this, but any systematic way of making that available to women, making that women seek that information and strengthen their arguments, then be more professional with the arguments that they're putting forward, with demonstrable change, information, data, always helps. So I think that is another area where most of us are conscious and try to build that information system for that organization or for the system. And not in the least important, I think, is the value of networks. There were many programs which I worked with in the government, which if I did not have networks amongst the women's movement of India, I would not have been able to fashion despite all my grassroots experience. So networks make a lot of difference. They bring to your table information, ideas, solutions, which no individual human being is capable, no matter how brilliant. So I place a lot of strength on networks which bring in these collective ideas, different approaches, and which always strengthen any organization to plan its activities, and most especially in the social sector. So this is a huge play which I think benefits anybody, men or women, on the table to get the right kind of perspectives or the right kind of deductions which would help that organization forward. So I think these were some of the thoughts which I thought I'd share, but in the conclusion, I certainly feel that that the scope of women in leadership is a role to do better for those who come after you. And that is very important, to feel that sense of place in the organization, in the movement of time, to be able to contribute, to be able to make it easier for many who will follow, and for men and women to have a perspective which is not only inclusive of gender, but inclusive of all those aspects which help social propulsion, social change, and social dynamics to move in what we think is a desired direction in India. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for inspiring us and sharing your insights on such a critical subject. Absolutely inspiring and so much for us to take away. Once again, thank you so much. Moving on, history has it. The 389-member committee that drafted the Indian Constitution had all of 15 women members, but each of them had a unique identity, was a role model and a flag bearer of most sensitive issues even today. Imagine if it was a 50-50 split. Even today, there is a dire need of representation of women in governance and leadership, and that's what our panel will be talking about. I'm thrilled to invite 4 incredible professionals as our panelists for the discussion. Please join me in welcoming Neera Nandi. Neera is the co-founder and partner at Dasra, where she leads Dasra's ecosystem building initiatives in the areas of adolescence, urban sanitation, and democracy and governance. Professor A.K. Shivkumar. Shiv is a development economist and policy advisor. He teaches economics and public policy as a visiting faculty member at Ashoka University, ISB, SP Chair and Research Center, and Harvard Kennedy School. Shiv is also the chairperson, Academic Council at ISDM. Vedika Bandakar. Vedika is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Water.org and has previously served as the Chief Global Impact Officer and the Managing Director there. And the session is being moderated by Anuradha Das Mathur. Anuradha is the founding dean of the Vedika Scholars Program for Women. She's also a founder director at 9.9 Media. Over to you, Anuradha.
Thank you, Priyanka. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. One of my most favorite people, Rosabeth Moss-Cantor, who was the editor for the HBR for a long time, said that the most radical thing we can do is to introduce people to one another. New connections and conversations spark innovation and transformation. So I think, whatever else comes out of this, I think big thank you to ISDM, Ravi and his team, to at least get this conversation going. The context, Ms. Swaroop said many things that resonated, and I think they will push you to think harder about the way we view many of these issues in our teams, in our organizations, and the system around us. But the context is that the social sector does have a better representation of gender overall. However, only 18% of large nonprofits have women CEOs. And as you go up the hierarchy, the same global issues surface, like in other parts of the economy. Far fewer women in leadership positions than men, and discrepancies in terms of pay and growth opportunities. Women-led causes are inadequately funded, and globally only 1% of gender equality funding goes to women-led organizations. Now, social enterprises was set up to enable fairer economies. And I think this conversation is critical because even this sector continues to reflect what we see in other segments of the ecosystem. Why must this change? And how can we facilitate this change? To answer these questions, I'm, like Priyanka, delighted with our star panelists. And I'm hoping that we will get lots of food for thought and pointers for action. I'm going to start with Vedika. Vedika, given that you have traversed the conventional corporate sector for a large part of your career, and now the social sector, how would you compare your experience across these two with respect to diversity in general, and specifically with respect to as you go up the hierarchy in these organizations?
Sure. Hi, Anuradha. Hello, everyone. And it's really good to be here. So I guess my headline message is that it's work in progress across both sectors. Diversity is still work in progress across both the corporate world as well as the social sector. I think if you look at the social sector and you start with the positives, in general, as you rightly said, Anuradha, there's much better gender diversity across the organization, right? If I look at my own organization where I work, I know out of a total of 130, I think we are 70 or maybe even more women. and less men. And that's true when I mean, I don't know if it's more women than men, but in general, gender diversity is much better in social sector. But you are right, and again, not to toot our horn, but we have a similar ratio right at the senior leadership. I think of our senior leadership executive team of 7, we have 4 women and 3 men. So yay, we're doing something right. But the numbers do fall in terms of senior leaders across social organizations. But I would like to not just about gender diversity, but also about ethnic and racial diversity. And this is especially true when we look at nonprofits, which their work span across multiple countries. So do we really have the voices, the people who we're serving, those voices, or from those communities at the senior most table? I think it's still very much a work in progress. When I look at the corporate sector, they are, in some parts of the corporate sector, they're much further behind. So yes, sectors like technology, sectors like finance, retail, services, they have a much better gender representation. But manufacturing or much more traditional industry, they just don't have good gender representation right from the entry level. But all of them, across all the sectors in the corporate level, the diversity tends to fall off even more starkly than it does in the social sector. So as I said, it's work in progress across both. I think the last comment I would make is the good news is both of these, both the social and the corporate sector, are very aware of it now, are very focused on it. The conversations are happening. Some of them are very uncomfortable conversations. For example, in the United States, there's a lot of conversation about race. And none of these conversations are pleasant, or it's hard to look critically at yourself. But I feel really hopeful and optimistic that these conversations are happening, and these will result to better things. Thanks, Anuradha.
Thank you. Can I just ask you a very quick follow-on question? Given that
Sure.
you have risen to the top in both sectors, is there one or two things that you can share with us that you think have made that possible for you?
First of all, I wouldn't say risen to the top, but I've been very lucky to have worked with great teams and great organizations. So I think that that's the first part. None of this, either in the corporate world or in the social world, it's an individual sport. It's always a team sport. So you have to be working with great teams. You have to be surrounded by incredible colleagues. You have to work with incredible leaders. So I've been lucky in both those cases. So I think that would be the first one. There is the other one I would say is good old-fashioned hard work, maybe. And you caught me a little off guard, Anuradha, so I'll think a little bit more about it.
Come back if something else strikes you. But I have to say that your first answer is just so much. I'm not saying female, I'm just saying feminine. The first answer is just so representative of the feminine in leadership. But thank you. Neera, if I could come to you next. You work across social sector organizations. You really do have 30,000 feet and then a very micro view of organizations that you watch and work with. What are some of your observations around diversity on boards? Also some trends in the sector? And do you have observations in terms of size, longevity, very importantly, the nature of donors in the organizations that you look at and their impact on what you observe in terms of diversity on boards?
So you asked me a very loaded question, Anuradha, for which I have to admit, please cut me off if I go over time, but I have to admit everything I'm sharing is awfully anecdotal because we don't actually have enough of a strong research base around understanding nonprofit boards. And therefore, our tendency resides a lot in our country to look to the US and see the US journey on boards. And I just would like to urge us to transcend that experience. And I think there's a lot that we can do in India to just accelerate diversity on boards. With that, I think we've made a lot of progress, although there continue to be a lot of challenges. I think like any organization, when you start off kind of as a founder, and I can speak for myself and it'll hopefully resonate with other founders, you start off with family and friends, right? You don't want to take a big risk. People don't want to take a big risk. They're not sure your organization's going to succeed, and you frankly don't have the time to deal with a board that starts asking a lot of questions when you're like in a survival kind of mode. So I actually think that works in the very beginning. What we've also seen is it's about at the 10-year mark where an organization actually starts to have some stability, your team is a bit larger, your funding's a bit stable. That's when you start thinking about, okay, this has grown, I can probably speak for myself, this has grown beyond my capabilities. Now actually having a board can support me in some of the decision making, but can also be there and watch out for things around governance and compliance. And that's really where you see the shift of founders being able to move or starting to move family and friends. But I have to admit, as a sector, I think we do it far later. And some of that comes from the challenge when you move from family and friends to sort of professionals or sector experts, you need process and system in the organization to be able to communicate and engage with the board. And then also be very clear on, so what kind of decisions is this board actually making? I think the other challenge in our country is the regulatory environment. And so you're seeing a lot of hesitance for individuals to want to enter into boards with the liability and the legal aspect. But there's nothing to take away from the fact that you can have a legal board, but you can also create an advisory board that merges together and is still involved in the governance or strategy or direction setting. So we're starting to see a lot of nonprofits take that kind of hybrid mode in some ways. So that's a little bit of kind of what we've been seeing. I thought it might be useful for us to speak about gender very specifically. But before I get to gender, I couldn't agree with Vedika more that diversity on the board has to move beyond gender. And that's really where, as a country, if we can crack gender, we can actually simultaneously crack community representation. And so how do you do both of them in, a parallel way? I think we should really accelerate as a country. But specifically with gender, I think what ends up happening with us is a lot of us women opt out. And what I'm very excited about the training program is that it creates a platform and a pathway for women. This training program that we're looking to launch to really encourage more women professionals onto boards is that it creates a pathway for women and then placing them there. But the challenge isn't just the training to some extent or us being able to place. The challenge is also, is there a sharing of power? So I think what ends up happening is you can bring diversity to the board, but if the chairperson and other established folks don't create the space and open up space and share that power, then the diversity actually doesn't really matter. So sharing power with men leaning in. So I know Vedika was like, oh, it was good luck and I was really lucky. I think it's because there's a lot of men in powerful positions who look out for you, right? Or promote this. And so how do you make them partners in this journey? And how are we creating that space on boards, I think is really important, especially as a chairperson. So chair people often will be the ones running the agendas of these boards. They need to be completely brought in that voice is being enabled in some way. So, Ms. Swaroop was talking about voice, that actually needs to be enabled by the sentiment of what is kind of around the table. So these were a couple of things that I thought I would highlight. I think the last thing around gender on boards is we have to, as a country, be more than one independent director on the corporate side. And so as a nonprofit sector, we should really push. I mean, I said, don't look at US research, but I did look at US research. And there's something to be said of the number 3. if you can bring 3 women onto the board, you will find that their feminine attributes. So that's the other thing that I think is worth clarifying. It's not personal attributes, I think, as Ms. Swaroop might have said. It's feminine attributes that need to come onto the board. You know, I went to Harvard Business School. I spent a number of years in investment banking, and I studied math. And I have a tremendous amount of masculine attributes that were learned over time. So what has also happened on corporate boards is you bring women onto corporate boards and they're all behaving in this with masculine attributes. What we need to do is encourage us to bring out the feminine attributes that can encourage that kind of diversity, is sort of my whole point around sharing power, but also us as women recognizing that that actually has, you know, a place. And we don't realize that some of that environment actually shapes the way that we behave. So I see you unmuted, so I'll pause here.
No, please, please wrap. It wasn't meant to cut you short. I was just getting ready to ask the next question. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to give one last anecdote really around, you know, why I'm a big believer in the training. And I know that Ravi, Aarti, and I had a lot of debate, like, should it just be for women, and why just women? It should be for everyone because, you know, men have to be partners in this. But I do realize that there's something to be said of bringing us together as women and recognizing what we need to be supported in the kinds of environments or the bias and the assumptions that are in these spaces, right? Or the way that these spaces behave. And I know from personal experience, for example, at Harvard Business School, where 60% of your grade is participation, you have to put your hand up in class. And we were about at 25%, maybe 27% in my class of women who didn't put your hand up. Now, what they ended up doing after I graduated was recognize the challenge we were facing. It brought women together and said, hello, first 15 minutes, put your hand up. Doesn't matter what you say. And it actually goes to Vedika's point. We all come with wanting to, you know, succeed with knowledge. And sometimes it's just, you know what, put your hand up and say something. And what will come out will be actually quite smart, and, you know, it'll be relevant, and you'll overcome this kind of syndrome that we suffer with. But yes.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, you know, I run a program for young women, equipping them to get into the workplace with attributes that they otherwise, you know, just haven't built. And confidence and courage is one of them. You know, just the confidence to raise your hand. And you're right, once you raise your hand, you're unlikely to say something stupid, but, you know, it's just, I think, generations of, you know, not being the troublemaker or sort of being loud and assertive. And I'm familiar with all the research that happened at Harvard between women in the class. And I mean, it's fascinating, and, you know, it's a conversation for another time. But I did want to say one little thing about the amplification of voices. There was a very interesting experiment that Barack Obama's White House did with women. And they say that, you know, when women make a point, it goes unnoticed, and then, you know, a senior man at the table makes the same point, and then there's a whole bunch of
mansplaining.
Yeah, and oh my God, that was a great point. And I mean, I noticed that even, you know, in meetings and things that I'm at. But in Obama's White House, the women decided that if there was a point that a man made, that a woman had made earlier, some other woman would say, oh, like Carla pointed out some time ago. Right. So I think we have to just become more conscious about these things that exist in the environment. And not only is it a place for that voice, but how can you amplify that voice to have power? Like you said, Neera. Yeah, Shiv, that's a great segue, by the way, into the theory of diversity, why it is important. And, you know, I know that you're a big believer in the intersectionality of stuff. And I think that's been alluded to both by Vedika and Neera. So tell us what, you know, why this is important. But I also want you to talk a little bit about what organizations and society at large stand to gain, but equally importantly, lose out when they don't take advantage or pursue diversity at every level in their organizations and in the things that we do. You're on mute, Shiv.
Sorry,
You've gone back on mute. You've gone back on mute.
Okay, hi, sorry. So I'm really nervous about talking after, and that's what I was beginning to say, after Vrinda, after Vedika, after Neera, after Anuradha, and I cannot even say that whatever they've said is good or bad. I should just keep quiet. No, I'm just joking. So listen, no. So thank you so much. Let me start by saying that diversity is extremely important, but we have to connect it with two other terms that are equally important. We sometimes use diversity as a surrogate to capture many dimensions of what we have been speaking about: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think once you look at diversity, then of course it's a matter of representation. And I think we have a long way to go. I mean, imagine the United States and Canada, after all these years of progressive thinking in the international, in the philanthropic sector, in the NGO sector, they're still very much in the beginning stages. So we're talking in India of even greater complexity in terms of getting adequate representation of caste, gender. Again, we have to be very careful. It's not just men and women. It's the space of gender and sexual identity is much broader. We haven't even started talking about that. There is religion, extraordinarily important. There is language. There is economic status. There is disability of various kinds. So it's a challenge. It's really a challenge. So it's very important at step one for the organization to embed this or ingrain this in their value system. The second one is, even when you come to the boards, I think Vrinda was referring to it, this kind of, you have one person there, two person there, you tick the mark on diversity. That's a good starting point. That's a good starting point. The Panchayat Raj system started like that with 1/3 representation. That's a good starting point. But the organization has to really ensure equity, which means guarantee fair treatment. So how do you really, in the board, create a culture where women find themselves having access, equal opportunity to participate and express their views and so on? So I think creating an atmosphere of equity is important. And the third one is, of course, inclusion. How do you make it an organization where people of different diverse backgrounds find themselves comfortable enough, welcomed, respected, supported, and valued. So I still find that in Indian organizations, yes, you might have women, but it is largely male dominated. There's a parallel conversation that goes on behind the board and after the board meetings and so on, where women seldom come together to participate in those conversations. So I think we have to really consciously make this emphasize diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are the benefits of an organization adopting these three values? Of course, there is extending the outreach. I think a diverse team will bring about, added with equitable practices, inclusive messaging, like was mentioned, the positioning of the organization becomes much more significant. You can broaden your reach and increase the chances of success, assuming that most of these organizations are trying to reach as nonprofits, as many people from different communities as possible. It makes it a much healthier workplace, especially if you create an environment where you feel you're heard, you're understood, you're appreciated. This level of comfort definitely strengthens teamwork, and I think you'll have less conflict, higher productivity in a much narrower sense. And I think we also forget that when you open it up consciously for diversity, you get more qualified staff as well. So we don't look at all, because what this does is that you widen the pool of applicants very consciously, and then this diversity gets reflected in the contribution of people to your own organization and board. So I think that's the benefits. What do we know? I think we know that, like was mentioned, it's a long journey. We have just started. Even in the United States, most of the research, I was just reading up in 2018, a study of the nonprofit boards, they said only 4.2% of the surveyed board members identified themselves as Hispanic, when the US population, nearly 18% of the total population at that time was Hispanic. So even just by going by numbers, we are in Canada in 2021, the study of 6,000 nonprofit boards said that only 8% were representative of the LGBTQ community. and only 6% had a disability, when the actual representation might be much more. So, but we have to begin somewhere, and I think that's where we have to push for. The fourth point, and the last one I'll make, is that we have to go beyond looking at representation and talk about impact. All right. So that's what we have been asking, and I think that's what Vrinda was saying. How do we make a difference? How, not just in terms of the whole functioning of the board and accelerating the organization's move towards its own mission and goals and reaching its goals and also. And then this Canada survey of these organizations in 2021 showed that only 30% had a written board diversity policy. So even to have a written policy on diversity, inclusion, and equity is extraordinarily important. And I think that makes it a difference. And if you put it on your website, it's so much more important to publicize and get a momentum going. In terms of the impact, I was very impressive finding that it says that boards with higher percentages of women tend to have more board member engagement. That is one of there are 3 criteria on making an impact: more board member engagement, higher fundraising engagement, and higher advocacy engagement. So I think there is some merit in saying that, yes, if you have more board members, there will be a representational of different diversities in this group, in the community that we are addressing. It will make a positive difference. And I think there's no doubt at all about that. Now, social science research tells you what is the minimum cutoff. I think Neera mentioned the number 3. It's really 30%. And when even the panchayat, should it be 25% women in panchayats, 40%, 50%? Somehow 1/3 seems to be the magic number. And I think in terms of influencing the other 2/3, I think if this 1/3 starts acting in a particular way, it has a much more dominating impact on the other 2/3. So I would still go with that. If you can borrow research findings from social sciences and bring it into the boards, I would really push for at least 1/3 representation. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Shiv. I think you answered one of my questions, which was, do numbers matter, and what would you take as a measure of diversity? So I think if we can work with the 1/3 as the aspiration, I think that's a good thing to work with. I do want to come back to, something that Ms. Swaroop started to talk about, which was optics matter. And in some ways, it's like saying, even if it's tokenism, it's important to get started. There is conversation around the downside of tokenism, which is that it can allow many people to stop the journey there, right? Tokenism is the start, and then how do you ensure that there is progress? So I just like all of you to talk to us a little bit about what to make sure and what to watch for, so that the tokenism doesn't become the hindrance or the obstacle in the path to better diversity and impact. Because it allows you to say, you are diverse already. So maybe we start with Vedika.
Sure. So, and before I answer your question, I just wanted to go back to something which Neera said, right? And both of you talked about, which is raising your hand. And this is something I often tell young women, all women, and my message always is, what's the worst that can happen, right, if you raise your hand? And that's often in the context of women telling me that they are hesitant to ask for the promotion, or they're hesitant to put their hand up for an opportunity. And I always tell them, well, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is your supervisor is going to say no. That's it. It's not fatal. The only thing which will happen is your ego might be hurt a little, but once you start thinking that way, that what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen in a class if you say something silly? People will laugh. That's okay. You move on, right? Hell, everybody says something silly at some point of time. So I just wanted to leave that out there. You asked about tokenism, and I really don't see it as tokenism anymore. Maybe when I was younger, I would have seen it as tokenism. I see it now as a nudge. And I feel like that nudge is really needed. So if you'd asked me when I was in my 20s, that should there be a law which says you have to have at least one independent woman director on the board, I would have said, no, women should come onto the board because they're good. Now, when I'm older and hopefully much wiser, I'll say, yes, bring it on. You brought one, maybe you go on to two, because I think as a society, as we certainly need those nudges. Otherwise, I do hope my daughter will join the workplace in a few years' time. I don't think in her lifetime we will still be as diverse as we should be in the corporate and in the social sector. But I'm hoping by the time my granddaughter joins the workplace, this conversation is no longer needed. So I look at tokenism as a necessary nudge. But I think Shiv made a very important point, which is it can become a hindrance because diversity or having those tick marks, right, doesn't automatically lead to inclusion. And there is some deliberate action needed from ticking the boxes to actually reaping the benefits and having that inclusive workplace. And Neera talked about it in terms of sharing the power. I agree, the chairperson has an incredibly important role in that. But I think that can be a hindrance if we just stop at the tick boxes and don't do the harder work which is needed, which requires change of behavior, which requires sharing of power, which requires being aware of the mansplaining, which requires a lot of these behavioral changes. So I think that can be the hindrance, but I would say, and the last point I would make, and I think Ms. Swaroop also talked about it, and I see it all the time. Optics are important. Successful senior women, whether they like it or not, a lot of women are watching them and they get inspired by those. And I think we need many, many, many more such examples. Thanks, Anuradha.
Thanks, Vedika. Thanks. Neera, can I get you to respond to the same thing?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a point in time, and it's the beginning of the journey. At least we've coined this term at Thusra called Jedi, not the Star Wars Jedi, but Jedi with a G, gender equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think tokenism is the beginning. It's kind of like affirmative action. I'm a believer that it actually works. Because with that initial tokenism, and if I do believe its meaning is mainly symbolic. So maybe in the beginning you are, or you're mandated, or you're doing it, to be symbolic. But that's the journey with which we have to start. But it'll take all of us to collectively, lean in and start to make a case for how it drives impact, at least in the social sector, or at least in the for-profit performance and results. Even in nonprofit, I think it's relevant. So as soon as it becomes an important part of how we are achieving our mission, I think that's really where it kicks off the sort of true Jedi journey. But in the meantime, if we are, being able to check the box, I do think that gets a lot of naysayers, right? It starts to break down our bias, our assumptions. It builds that pipeline. So there is benefit of the symbolic. I think there's even a larger benefit of making it, legal and part of law, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's a bunch of questions, and in the interest of time, I'm going to take some of those questions and we'll see who's best to answer it. So this says there's a dire need for diversity. Devika Menon says there's a dire need for diversity. Yes, but who are the stakeholders responsible for bringing this shift towards a more inclusive leadership in nonprofits? Do you feel that a more diverse or representative leadership will have a trickle-down effect in a given organization? I think some of you made the point about the chair of the board, but in addition to that, what could this be? I thought this was... Will one of you take it?
Neera? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Shiv? Yeah, no, go ahead, Shiv.
No.
Go ahead.
I think it's a very important question, and how do we really move beyond numbers and targets for representation to create a change in the organization and the way the organization functions and behaves. And I think that's the challenge. Whose responsibility is that? And because targets and numbers have an instrumental significance, but we're talking about changing the organizational culture, and that is really has to be driven by the top leadership of the board. So in addition to ensuring that the targets, I would say that the board leadership should ask 3 or 4 very critical questions. And I think that will drive the organization. So if you're in a board meeting and you have in your board agenda regular reporting on how well are you doing in this area, not just for information that, yes, we recruited 3 more people and we've got 4 more women in the group, but we are trying to ask how transparent does your organization or is your organization about the steps it is taking to become more diverse and encouraging of inclusive practices. So what are you doing about it? Does your non-profit create opportunities to listen to voices? And if you're dealing with communities, what are the mechanisms in place? You just can't say, yes, I'm respectful of the communities I serve. Where are the communities? Who are the voices? What mechanisms? Do you have any mechanisms in place to do this? Again, in your recruitment, it almost sometimes appears to me, oh, you know what? We found we had 3 positions and we have recruited 2 as women. That doesn't please me at all. What efforts did you make starting from the beginning? Who are applying to your organization today? What is the representation of applicants you're getting? Is there a change? That would tell me that, yes, you are indeed making a significant effort to reach out. And finally, I think the most important is, how does your organization assess the progress that you're making towards your goals of diversity, inclusion, and equity? What will it look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I think these are very difficult questions to answer, but there has to be the board and the senior leadership that prioritizes and drives these values beyond representation and numbers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add a quick point?
Yeah,
Anuradha?
sure.
And,
Yeah.
And it really upsets me when I'm as a board member when I ask this question, and in terms of even recruiting or promoting, and I'll be told, oh, but there isn't a pipeline, or we can't find the candidates, and I think I just feel that's a lazy answer.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things which we should do is to make push leaders to look at diversified slates, whether it's internal promotion or whether it's external hires. And it's a little more hard work. It's hard work to find the right networks. It's harder work for the recruiters. It's certainly harder work for the leaders. But if you keep pushing, then that becomes practice, right? And then it's it becomes part of your DNA. But this is a very common answer. Oh, we would love to, but there's no pipeline.
Where are they? Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Anuradha, but I think the larger challenge is to ask ourselves, who's accountable to whom?
Yeah.
Right? So it's a nonprofit. See, I think in the for-profit sector, the corporate boards have somewhat figured it out, although there's challenges there. But in the nonprofit board, we're not clear about that level of accountability. So ultimately, success for JEDI work or this diversity work lies in leadership. Because most of the boards are rubber stamp boards, to be honest. It's like founders and leaders can probably do whatever they want at the end of the day. Our boards don't even fundraise like the US board. So what do most of the nonprofit boards, besides run their audit committees once in a while, actually do? Probably should be questioned. But then the larger question becomes, it works top down if the top is holding leadership accountable and you've built that kind of relationship to actually happen. Otherwise, it rests in all of us, frankly, as founders and leaders, to start thinking about how this is staying accountable on mission, and it's going to allow us to achieve even more impact, but it's really based on a true set of values that this sector actually needs to be driven by. But we don't ask ourselves that accountability question enough.
Yeah, in fact, I thought I would ask, I don't think we'll have the time, but what are the 2-3 things that the not-for-profit sector can take as things to learn or to adapt from the for-profit sector? And some of these norms or reporting requirements could probably be one of those. I mean, Vedika alluded to that as well. There's an interesting question around Can you tell us what, from examples on how senior leadership decision-making would be different between men and women? And I'm going to just translate that into masculine and feminine traits. So any examples that you all can share to bring alive this value of the feminine on boards, or how it would be different?
Maybe you
You're
should
all
hear a
smiling.
masculine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe you should hear a masculine voice first. A daring young man. No. So let me tell you at some level, the kinds of people who make it to the boards have no reason to feel less privileged or intimidated in that sense. Okay, and just if I can tell you, I was the global co-chair of an initiative, global learning initiative called No Violence in Childhood. And this was a 5-year global, we brought out a global report. We were looking at violence against women and violence against children. And 99% of the people, professionals working in this space are women. And so when I was made the global co-chair, the other co-chair was Baroness Vivian Stern from the House of Lords. I said, hey, you guys have got this token man there now. And I feel three roles in one. I'm a 3-in-1. I'm a man, I'm an economist. Very few economists ever enter this space of looking at violence against women and violence. And I'm from deep south and the north south also. So you are very lucky and you're tick. But that is never the sense one got. That is never the sense one got because of the way everyone worked together and so on. I think that how do we really lead by intent and lead by action? And I think that is the key words are those, the leadership. And how do we really get things moving in the right spirit? You must have the tough conversation. You have to define the board priorities clearly. You have to start and be intentional, be bugging every time. You have to keep pushing. And we have to foster a culture of continuous learning. And because this is a journey and we have to constantly go at it. And that cultural change in the organization's culture has to be led by a very strong subcommittee or subgroup in the board that is dedicated to this idea of equity, inclusion, and diversity.
Neera, Vedika, any examples on how things would have been different if there was a man on the board versus woman, and I mean masculine versus feminine?
I was trying to say that men can be also as feminine as you were.
Absolutely, Shiv. That's the reason why I keep coming back to masculine and feminine traits as opposed to men and women. Yeah.
I think I would say over the last 2 years, with the pandemic and all the associated economic and social upheavals, organizational upheavals, not-for-profits, many of them had pretty significant funding issues. So, and I'm talking both of for-profit and non-profit boards. I think going through that, and I'm trying to think of what it would have been if it were only masculine or only feminine. And I really can't even fathom either, because I do think it needed the combination, and we are not out of it today. It needs the combination of both of those traits in terms of, because there were so many decisions which had to be taken, and some were incredibly tough, which had never been done in the organization's histories. And it really needed all of those to come together.
I don't think you could have given us a better example, Vedika. So thanks for that. I think we have literally 2 minutes left, and I'm going to wrap this up with a question for all of you. The thing that is most damaging to both men and women is stereotypes. If there is one stereotype that we wanted to fight or take out of our system for more women on boards and the diversity that would come with that, to just make it easier and facilitate the path for more women on boards, what is that one stereotype that you would like to fight or throw out of the window?
Rather with 2 minutes to go, you're making all of us sit quietly and think. So maybe I should blurt out my answer first.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Shiv.
Stereotypes can be negative, and that's the general impression. But stereotyping can also be extraordinarily positive in terms of the role models and images that you create. And I think the role of stereotyping is critical in this space, where we just project the extraordinary leadership qualities in women, and that it makes no difference. I think you go to Iceland and others, and you find more women leaders over there in parliament and in ministries. So there is, where was it? And I think some Latin American country also, there are more women leaders in the cabinet than men. I think we just have to keep pushing the positive stereotyping of women as exceptional leaders.
Very nice.
You don't have to necessarily run down men as being so.
Yeah. Neera, you're on mute.
Yeah, so I think that we've been talking about this a lot. I think the biggest stereotype is that all women come with feminine attributes. And so, breaking that down a lot more as to what helps us. And just to build on that earlier question, I actually think we do approach decision-making differently, right? I know you have only a few seconds, but we should look at that deeper and why, therefore, that's helpful. But the one tip I wanted to give, I know that's not the question you asked, is push for turnover on your boards. Get people off your board to bring diversity.
Yeah.
I love Shiv's answer of positive stereotyping. So I love that. But I would say the one stereotype I hope we could get away from is saying women are emotional. Oh my God, I hate it. Yeah.
I'll start crying now.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm going to hand over back to Priyanka just in time.
Thanks, Anuradha.
Thank you, Anuradha.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anuradha, Neera, Vedika, Professor Shiv. Such pleasure listening to you all. I wish we had more time. Your diverse experiences and thoughts have only further strengthened my belief in the need for gender diversity to improve board leadership and create much greater impact in the sector. Thank you so much for reinforcing that thought.
Thank you.
Even though research shows that organizations with women on their boards perform better, there aren't enough women in leadership positions and on social impact organization boards. We just discussed this. We at ISDM not only believe in the power of and need for gender diversity, but also to equip individuals with the skills to deliver sustainable impact at scale. What was sown as a tiny seed of a crazy idea in some of our minds by Aarti a few years ago has been nourished and grown into a full-fledged offering by the collaborative efforts of friends from Dasra and some of us at ISDM, ready to launch today. Without taking another moment, I invite Ravi to launch the program and say a few words.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you so much. And what an amazing panel discussion. So many takeaways. Huge thank you to Shiv, Neera, Vedika, and Anuradha. But yeah, I'm going to do the formal duties. So it's such a pleasure to be here today and see all the plans and hard work taking shape in the form of the formal launch of the Women on Boards program. This program is particularly close to our hearts as it's not just one of its kind, but also the first in the series of nation building programs that ISDM plans to launch, reaching out to different segments that have a disproportionate influence on social change. This definitely wouldn't have been possible without the relentless efforts of Neera, Pallavi, and Jivika from Dasra. Aarti Madhusudan, who is this, I call her the one man or one woman industry, absolutely amazing, from Governance Counts, and indeed my dear colleague Priyanka from ISDM. So I'm delighted, I'm privileged, I'm proud to announce the Women on Boards program formally launched. We have put together a small video that captures the essence of this offering. And I'm going to request Anush Mita if she's able to play that video. And thank you all once again. I'm leaving with lots of thoughts and ideas. Thank you very much. The audio isn't playing.
Yeah, the sound, please.
Thank you and best wishes.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Like Ravi said, this program couldn't have been possible without the expertise of who we lovingly call a one-woman army, Aarti Madhusudan. I request Aarti to throw light on this program from her decades of experience in the space of governance. Over to you, Aarti.
Thank you, Priyanka, and thank you, everybody. I mean, with all those lovely words being, said, I'm like on cloud 9. I honestly feel like, when a new baby is born, the excitement that everybody in the family sort of experiences exactly what I'm feeling today with this program formally being launched. I think a lot has been said about, the importance of diversity, the importance of having women on boards, and so on by the panelists. Very, very valuable, prudent advice. I just wanted to make 1 or 2 points as we excitedly launch this program today. And I think that is with the hope that when women join or get on to boards of nonprofit organizations, just given their ability to negotiate and being heard, which is lived and learned, like Ms. Swarup said earlier, that is something that the sector can really do wonders with. Right? We are constantly trying to have our voices heard, and just having women on boards with the experience that hopefully the training will bring for them will be extremely valuable and useful. The second point I want to make is just helping the mission push with greater prudence and a complementarity of what I call, passion, purpose, and competence, right? I think that would be extremely valuable. And again, something that we're hoping our training program will enable women who apply to experience. And lastly, in my experience of just working with several boards, I can say that the greater the diversity on the board, the richer is the governance, the more balanced it is. Some of the panelists spoke about voices having to be heard, and hopefully with what we're doing, we can enable that to happen a lot more easily. And the last point, of course, is, which is my pet peeve, is how do women who apply to this program and how do women who are on boards take that experience back to their own context, to their own organizations, and really use that to influence the way that they operate and the way that their peers operate in the organization. So we just create a more compassionate and socially purposeful and conscious society. So yes, very excited, as excited as a new parent is, and looking forward to the next 3 months. It's been a complete delight to work with friends from Dasra and ISDM. So yeah, thank you, Priyanka, for giving me the opportunity to sort of say this.
Thank you so much, Aarti, and thank you all. We already have a lot of interest from people for the program, and I'm really excited to meet the first cohort. This brings us towards the end of the Diversity Matters segment. I thank you all for your presence and engagement. I now invite Urvi Sriram, our host for the next segment, Philanthropy Matters, Urvi leads ISDM's first Center of Excellence, Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice. Over to you, Urvi.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session on Philanthropy Matters. Philanthropy in India is at a very exciting juncture. We're seeing a trend towards increased, more structured and organized giving. Many new forms of philanthropy are rapidly coming up with support and solutions from the ecosystem. And it's not just a growth in financial resources alone. The levels of interests, efforts, and aspirations of philanthropists for transformational social change have gone up as well. All these developments strengthen our belief that philanthropy has immense potential to help achieve our sustainable development goals, solve some of the most persistent problems, and make India much more equitable than it is today. We at ISDM are very excited and happy to launch our first Center of Excellence, the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice, amongst everyone present today. We hadn't thought that we would be starting like this in the middle of another wave of the pandemic, but if anything, the events of the last 22 months have only reinforced the crucial role that philanthropy can play, both on its own and in collaboration with other stakeholders to help communities respond to even the most complex of challenges. We're honored and grateful to have a very eminent and diverse set of speakers today to discuss how we, as individuals, families, institutions, and as policymakers, can support and further strengthen philanthropy's role as an agent of sustainable social change. Over the next hour and a half, we have a keynote address, followed by a panel discussion, and the launch of the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice. Thank you very much once again for joining us today. It is my privilege to invite and introduce our keynote speaker for today, even though he's someone who hardly needs an introduction, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Chairman of Hero Enterprise. Mr. Munjal is an entrepreneur, investor, thought leader, and author with multiple passions and interests. He focuses his philanthropy on promoting Indian arts through his nonprofit, the Serendipity Arts Foundation, and supports theatre and music as the president of the Ludhiana Sanskritik Samagam. His passion lies in promoting digital learning, healthcare, women empowerment, and children's education. Mr. Munjal has also made many contributions to develop the sphere of impact investing in the country. He has been actively involved in corporate governance and policy advocacy and sits on the board of several organizations and educational institutions like the Doon School, IIM Ahmedabad, Indian School of Business, and SRCC. He has co-founded the BML Munjal University and is the president of Dayanand Medical College and Hospital, Ludhiana. Mr. Munjal, thank you so much for joining us today. It is indeed an honor for us to have you here to share your views on philanthropy in India and the role that it can play in transforming social institutions. Over to you.
Thank you, Urvi, and thank you for the long but completely unnecessary introduction. It was too long. I saw somebody put it up in the chat box. I think that too is not necessary. But I want to thank you personally, both for inviting me, because as you know, that this is not a subject that I normally talk about, but your passionate enthusiasm and your earnest method of putting this across is what compelled me to come and have a conversation with all of you today. I don't quite know who all the audience is and what the size of the audience is, but I would like to say that this is a subject which is both critical and important for all of us, not just as Indians, but as citizens of the world. I also want to expand the topic a little bit, Urvi, beyond what you said. I think we need to understand the relationship between philanthropy, donation, doing good through business, impact investment, and doing good through sales and marketing budgets of organizations. All of these are actually complementary, and all of them have a real role to play. Since you're talking about philanthropy, I will focus on that, but I just want to leave this on the table that we always have to be careful when we bring these up, that there is a role for each of these in building our societies. First, I think it's absolutely important and critical for those of us who are fortunate, who have the means, and more importantly, have the ability to say yes or no. We must remember that we live in a country where 200+ million people find it difficult to get 2 meals in a day. And another 200 million people will do whatever is offered to them because they do not have a choice. So we are doubly blessed. We are truly in a special privileged position. If I talk about our own family, my father, his brothers, my mother, and others were actually refugees at the time of independence. And like millions of others, they came across the border when their home suddenly became a foreign country. And again, like millions of others, they came with nothing. They left everything they had behind, their homes, their business, their properties, assets, and they started from scratch. They built for themselves in one generation, not just a business, but a place for themselves as responsible individuals and responsible families in society. So this started not today, this started 6 or 7 decades ago. Our way of saying thank you, reaching out and trying to do things which we believe will benefit communities and society. And now let me take a step back and talk about why it is important for all of us to focus on this a little bit. And there are 2 completely different angles I think we need to focus on. One is that there is for us a reason for reasons of ensuring that you do not have strife in a society where people are living in abject poverty and without access to basic facilities, amenities, and the quality of life is not what it ought to be. And it is important to understand that first, for a human angle, it is important for us to ensure a minimum standard of living for all of these individuals. If we do not do this, there is a serious potential for crime rates to go up. Because when somebody is starving, she or he doesn't care about what the rule of law is. They will do what it takes to provide for themselves and especially to provide for their families. For more than human reasons, we need to do this. On the flip side, and this is the big plus of doing this, is if you're able to provide a basic standard of living to most individuals, in fact, all citizens of the country, what you do create is higher aspiration amongst individuals to lead a better quality of life and to provide better amenities and facilities for themselves and for their children, for their family members, for their friends and colleagues. And that creates a multiplier, and that creates a virtuous cycle of growth, because all of these individuals will become consumers for goods and services produced by enterprise and business. And as they earn, their aspiration goes up. As their aspiration goes up, they are able to feed that if they have the ability to get sustainable economic opportunities. So philanthropy, I believe, has a really serious, big, and an important role to play. Government all over the world never have the wherewithal to provide everything that needs to be provided. It is therefore important that individual and enterprise step in and play a role. And now I'm not talking of CSR, I'm not talking of donations now, or the minor donations we do. So let me roll back again a little bit. So in our family, we've restructured the family group, as some of you may know. But before we did this, we are a very large family, and we were lucky to have a large number of companies in the group as well. So we started doing this at 4 different levels. Every individual was encouraged to do philanthropy in the area that she or he likes. Just give me half a second, please. Half a second. So we would encourage every individual to focus on areas of their personal passion and interest. And then as families, as a large family, we were doing something at the family level. We did the same thing for the companies. Individual companies were encouraged to do what they felt was important in and around their own areas of influence, and usually physically close to where the companies were set up. And then the fourth was at the group level, what we would do. And I'm talking of long before CSR came in as a regulation or as a fashion. In fact, the year this conversation was taking place, I was president of CII, and I was encouraged on behalf of the entire industry to push back against government and say, this regulation is not a good idea. It might encourage people to fudge. In India, many people already like to do things without making announcements. The moment you force them to make an announcement, it changes the entire picture for them, and some of them might draw back. I have to say, however, I was wrong. This regulation got established, and we have seen in the last some years when CSR has been practiced, not everybody has done a great job, but some organizations have done a wonderful, wonderful job. So CSR, in addition to the philanthropy that we would otherwise lead, is also supplementing many of these initiatives, as does impact investment. Impact investment is actually business. It's going out and investing in those businesses which provide social goods, which provide facilitation for social goods, which provide infrastructure for benefit of society. Now, the one thing that we have said, and we are active investors on impact investment as well. And as Urvi was explaining, our areas of the areas that we work in, and not all of them are investment. I'm going to cover all of them together because bulk of them are done through philanthropy, is education, starting from basic primary education. In fact, last year, we set up a pre-nursery and our attempt in our education in all our schools, I think we have about 30,000 students studying in our high schools right now, is to make the learning experiential, practical, and value-based. In fact, interestingly, the new education policy that has just been announced, which in many ways is revolutionary, is actually a takeoff on what has been done in some of these schools. Since you mentioned Doon School, Urvi, Doon School already practices all of these. Looks at sports, debating, adventure as part of education. I think it's important that philanthropy itself also drives some of the policy making to make sure that the field is open, it's fair, it's transparent, and it allows you to do what you believe is the right thing. The second area in which we have been involved is healthcare. The hospital that I chair right now, Dayanand Medical College and Hospital in Ludhiana, runs both a medical college and a nursing college, and one of India's largest teaching hospitals. We are close to 1,900 beds in one location with 26 super specialties. And we have an unusual model that we've developed. The model is that our attempt is to provide best in class care to the common citizen of the country. Our equipment, training, research, and skills that are provided to all the healthcare workers are at the level of the best for-profit institutions. But of course, we are a complete not-for-profit. We charge 40% less than the for-profit. I'm talking of the top institution because we are as good as, our outcomes are as good as almost any institution in the country. 40% of what we earn goes towards supporting poor patients who cannot afford it. It still continues to make money. All that money is redeployed to continue to grow, to modernize, and to improve our systems. We actually don't refuse any patient that comes in. Any patient that comes in, the treatment, they are admitted and treatment is started. And then we ask them, please tell us, do you have money or not? Do you have insurance or not? If you have it, of course you have to pay us. If you don't, we will support you. But inside the hospital, nobody is aware who is a full fee paying patient, who pays half, or who is completely free. So the treatment is exactly the same to any and every patient. And we do the same thing in our schools for the support and scholarships that is given to students. Amongst the many schools we run, one of the schools is specially focused on children of industrial workers. This was started because many of our businesses started from Ludhiana and Punjab. And almost all the unskilled and semi-skilled workers there come from Eastern UP, Bihar, and other parts of India, They're not local residents. They leave their families behind and they live a very difficult life. And they actually run 2 homes, one in Punjab where they're working and 2 back home where their families are. So we encourage them to bring their families to Ludhiana. We said, we will set up schools that will educate your children. Our hospitals will take care of your and your family's health. And we will provide you support to build your own homes here so that the entire family lives together as a unit. Because as we all know, as a part of the social structure, a lot of the social structure that we currently run is broken. And a lot of the reason for that is poverty or lack of access to facilities. Even lack of access to justice has a big contribution in this. That school, of course, started many, many decades ago now. But today, in almost every year, if you look at the results in the schools in Punjab, it always ranks amongst the top schools. In the top 10 students passing out every year, there are at least 2, 3, and sometimes even 5 from just this one school. And these are children, if they had not moved in here, would never actually have gone to school. So the idea is for us to realize that we are not smarter than anybody else. It is just the access and opportunity that got offered to us, which allowed us to do what we do. And the same is the case with these young children. They've done an amazing job. And as Urvi mentioned, the other area, of course, we also work on things like clean drinking water. We work on integrated village development to try and create systems of hygiene, etc. We work on vocational skills, especially for girls and women, to make them either self-sufficient or earning members of the family, or learn other skills beyond what they already do, to let them choose for themselves what they would like to do with themselves, not be forced into making choices because they don't have any. And the last, and in some sense, personal passion of mine, and I must say education and healthcare is a passion as well, is the focus on arts and culture. Realizing that for any society, any country, any nation state to be considered successful, there are 4 ingredients which are absolutely essential. One is the ability to protect yourselves and your citizens. Second is to become a player in geopolitics. Third is to have a quality and a growing economy. And fourth is to have a strong cultural underpinning and ethos as a nation to anchor yourselves to. On the first 3, we're actually doing quite well in the last few decades. On the last one, unfortunately, we are declining. I saw somebody right now from DASRA. DASRA actually did an interesting research report only some years ago, where they showed that in 30 years, we have lost 30% of our cultural strength. If you look at our artisanal skills, for example, they reside in the rural parts of India. Because they have not been remunerated, because they've not been in touch with the market, so they're not able to make products which the contemporary markets want. Those are declining businesses. Parents who would normally teach their children to get into the same profession are not only not teaching them, they are encouraging their children to get away and do other things. Go to towns, go to cities, become sales girls, become bank tellers, join BPOs, and the like. And when they come to towns and cities, we have another problem. There are not a whole lot of jobs vacant. The infrastructure in the city is already creaking. So it creates a separate social, additional social burden and a problem. So it is important that we try and revive some of our declining crafts, contemporize those skills. So one of the things that we do as Serendipity Arts, and we are now expanding the scope of what we do, one is to try and democratize the access to arts and culture, because arts and culture had created these 2 separate silos, high arts and low arts. High arts seem to have become the exclusive domain of only a few. We would like to open that up to everybody because we all have the same sensibility. It's again about access and opportunity. Second is to encourage revival of the arts and crafts. Third is to encourage philanthropy in culture, because while philanthropy in India is getting better, is getting more organized, and I believe it is essential to run philanthropy in as organized a fashion as any organization business is run, to be effective, to be able to meet your objectives, and to have continuing growing goals for higher and bigger reach. Because scale has a magical quality. So anything that we do, we like to do at scale in the same manner as we run our businesses. In fact, fortunately, many of our not-for-profits are actually run by senior executives who retired from our companies. So these not-for-profits have the same kind of expertise and knowledge base as our companies do. We also use the same process and systems in some of these. In fact, we have set up ERPs in some of these, which seemed to surprise people initially when we did introduce them. But now when they see the benefit, their ability to do more is significantly enhanced. Their ability to measure themselves is better. Their ability to learn from failures. And because, by the way, we do a lot of experimentation. So of course we have lots of failures, but we've never allowed failure to stop us doing more of the same, but do it differently so that next time around you learn from the failure. We use failure as our biggest learning post. Our attempt now is to use arts and culture also as a bridge to connect India to the region and India to the world. At this moment, we have now just started work on building a permanent establishment in Delhi, which will be amongst the largest art and culture centers in the world. And this is currently in conversation with 40 others like itself around the globe to be able to provide a bridge where people-to-people connection and connection through arts and culture can truly benefit the nations, because defense agreements, business agreements, etc. are good, but it is people who will make the big difference. And eventually we must remember all that we do is eventually for people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Munjal, for those very useful and inspiring insights, and especially for sharing your own story and personal experiences with us today. I hope your journey and approach to philanthropy and your focus on strengthening diverse areas like arts and culture inspires many more people to do more, and also to work on enhancing philanthropy's impact and effectiveness in India and actually wherever effective philanthropy might be practiced in the world. Some of the key takeaways for me were, that philanthropy has a big, serious, important role to play. It should drive policy making much more than it is today. We need to build meaningful partnerships and collaborations. And most importantly, philanthropic efforts have to be very focused, outcome-based, and metrics-driven to drive meaningful impact at scale. Thank you very much once again for joining us today.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. The current surge in giving and the growing interest in philanthropy at a practical and at an intellectual level is also throwing into sharper focus some of the associated issues and challenges. We need to ask, what will it take to multiply and amplify the potential of philanthropy to tackle some really complex issues? How can we challenge conventional understandings of philanthropy and management towards making the world more just, equitable, and sustainable? We need to find answers to such hard questions about its role in supporting long-term social change in a country with such deep social and economic divisions. And one of the best ways to do this is by having more conversations like this one today. With that in mind, I would now like to invite 4 incredible people as our panelists for today: Ms. Radhika Bharatram, Mrs. Deepthi Bopia, Mr. Soumitra Pandey, and Mr. Gautam John. Thank you so much for joining us today. Gautam is the Director of Strategy at Nilekani Philanthropies, and he will be moderating this discussion on rethinking philanthropy for enduring social change. Over to you, Gautam.
Thank you so much, Urvi, and thank you, Mr. Munjal, for that wonderful sharing of your learnings and reflections, and in particular, the landscape of different kinds of capital available to social purpose organizations and the remarkable diversity of work you support. In particular, when you touched upon the idea of citizenship and economic stability and policy changes, I was reminded of Martin Luther King's articulation of how philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. To that end, we have a stellar panel that is very well placed to help us dive deeper into this question. of how philanthropy can play a more significant role in supporting long-term systemic and inclusive change, and whether it can challenge imbalances of social economic power. Recognizing the limitations of the Republic of Zoom, please could you post your questions in the Q&A tab? We have time at the end of this session. We have 10 to 15 minutes to respond to these prompts, and I promise we'll get to those. I'm not going to do a formal round of introductions. None of our panelists require introductions. Their work speaks for themselves, but I will bring them into conversation one at a time, and then we'll have a more free-flowing conversation between us and take your questions as well. To open this discussion, I'm thrilled to introduce Radhika Bharatram. She's the joint vice chairperson of the Shri Ram Schools. And aside from this, she has a range of interests in the development sector, from disability to cancer care and gender equity. Radhika, these are a varied and important set of interests you have, all of them deeply tied to the idea of social justice, whether education, disability, or gender. Would love to hear, what this journey looked like for you and what your key inflection points were. Given your proximity to the education space, would also love to hear on the social justice dimension of the burden that has inequitably been borne by the marginalized around school closures in times of COVID. Radhika?
Thank you and namaste, Gautam. I don't think there was one inflection point for me. I think it was, collection of experiences through volunteering, understanding and interacting with various groups of marginalized people that have been part of my life, whether it was the visually impaired at the Blind Relief or the craft people that I have had the opportunity to work with, or the foundation schools that we run, the children who are part of that, or our staff at home, the children who are part of our staff. And, one realized that there was immense potential, but lack of opportunity and access was stopping their growth. And what stood out even more starkly for me was that I didn't see many women. I was not seeing opportunities being given to women. And while all this was happening in the last 15 years, I think possibly you could say that, my inflection point was when I decided that I had to do something about it. And it was whether it was at Blind Relief to start pulling many more women, visually impaired women in there, or working with many more craft women. Also, what sort of helped me through this journey was recognizing my privilege. I think Mr. Munjal mentioned it before. I think when you come from a position of privilege, I think we owe it. It's our responsibility to give back. And, giving back doesn't always need to be monetary. It can be your time. It could be providing opportunity to others. And that has been my journey. My journey has been, having conversations with people, understanding them, and not a top-down approach, but more pulling in people and understanding their circumstances. And probably that's helped me even start the fellowship program for young women. So many young women getting educated, but really what happens to them after their schooling. And that's a small effort in giving back. I have also learned in my journey that there are two types of philosophy to giving, one being impacting many, many lives, and the other being impacting small number of people. I practice the latter one. I like to work with and for people. I need to be connected with them to see the impact that's happening. And that's the way I like to work. You asked me about education. We all know what is happening in the education space in India in the last 2 years. Our schools haven't opened. While elite schools will sort of ride this tide well, I worry about the rest of India. I worry because we do see a dropout rate in schooling. We do see young girls getting married a lot more now. The digital divide and the access to education isn't there. And for me, Gautam, the most important thing is school is just not a space where you go for academics. It's so much more than that. It is skill building. It's sort of, recognizing the kind of human you are and you want to become, the peer interaction, the leadership skills. I think we have denied our children for the last 2 years of that growth. Schools do need to open. We can create all the content we want to create. Digital is great, technology is great, but you can never, ever substitute an educator in the classroom. And I really hope that we open schools. We have a lot of work to do, especially we need to work on mental health, and we need to bridge the gap that has increased a lot. So that's from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Radhika. I know all of us really appreciate the calling out of the privilege that we have, and how we must front and center that as we start to do this work. And your points on reopening schooling are well noted and well taken. I think would find great resonance among all of us attending today. I do hope they open soon. Deepthi, if I could bring you in, by way of introduction, Deepthi Bopaya is the CEO at Go Sports Foundational, which is a national award-winning not-for-profit organization founded in 2008 that supports junior, emerging, and elite athletes in Olympic and Paralympic disciplines. She strongly believes in and is building a sustainable athlete-centric sporting ecosystem through the foundation's programs and initiatives. Deepthi, building from what Radhika said around the value of in-person work, particularly with children, sports has been a much larger dot on our public radar than ever before over the last couple of years. And while the importance of sport in and of itself is something that we've all grown to appreciate, I know we'd all love to hear from your experience on sport, philanthropy, and social justice. In particular, we hold the ideals of sport as something that can be universal, barrier-free, and non-partisan. Why is it important? How can sports be a pathway to social justice?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Gautam, and congratulations, ISDM. Very, very inspiring conversation so far. I'm a little under the weather, so please excuse me for coughing in between when I'm speaking. So in terms of sport, today we spoke a lot about diversity, equality, inclusion, equity, social justice, all these aspects. And then you wonder why are we talking about sport? But if you remember a few months ago when Neeraj Chopra and many others who won their medals at the Olympics and 19 medals at the Paralympics, all of us just stood up and followed it with great pride. The fact that as Indians we were on a world stage doing really well. And over our last 13-year journey, we've really seen how one role model who does really, really well can change so many different scenarios for our youngsters, for Indians. So we've, whether you look at Abhinav Bindra's medal that happened, for many, many, many decades, we believed that we just, how can we be such a large population and not have a gold medal? And when that actually happened, it created a belief that we can also go on to go and win medals. But when you step back and when as a nation we start talking about just achievement at the elite category, we tend to forget that this is a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year process sometimes. And there are more people who fail along the way than actually make it to the top. But what happens to these people who actually take up sport and enter sport? We believe that in their own communities, they become heroes. In their own way, they're giving back. They learn skill sets which cannot be learned in a lot of other areas. Mr. Munjal just spoke about cultural, ethos, and that's one of the ways in terms of how you gauge how a nation is doing. And I would also say that sport plays a very important role in that aspect. And when you look at all the different things that have happened over the years, it's really amazing to see how far we've come as a nation, because there was this constant belief that as Indians we don't have it in us, we don't have the bodies, we don't have the physical ability to really beat people from other countries. So when you look at it from that context, it's not just creating a belief system for youngsters, but it's also making them influencers. Because today, a young athlete who does well is not just about their sport. They become a person with influence, who can influence ideas, ideologies, beliefs, and create so much more for the society at large. And I think that's something we at the foundation have been quite particular about, that you don't want a gold medalist who does not have an opinion or a perspective, right? You want someone who understands what are the different social aspects where they can contribute, what are the aspects they can take up, voice their opinions. And it's really, really heartening to see how different athletes have taken up such important topics over the year to talk about what they feel. Even something as important as menstrual health or mental well-being, or there are other aspects of topics which athletes also take. And I think the society at large is also, we're not just fans of these people just because of their sheer achievement, but we also look up to a lot of our people who've done well to show us the way. And I think sport has such a powerful role in that whole domain. And it's really just inspiration is one aspect, but I think there are so many other belief systems at a societal level that we can really overcome through the pursuit of excellence. Over
Thanks
to you.
so much. Thanks so much, Deepthi. That was really, really helpful. And I like what you called out in the fact that sports has become so much more front and center. And I think it's worth pausing a moment to reflect on the fact that it's not just one thing. It can be a pathway to many, many things, and to embrace it for the holistic nature of it rather than just as a pathway to medal. So thank you for calling that out. Samitra, if I can come to you, Samitra Pandey, as many of you will know, is a partner at the Mumbai office of Bridgespan. He's passionate about the opportunities for social change and nation building that India currently presents. Samitra, throughout your work in that of Bridgespan, addressing the underlying causes of inequity and the role of philanthropy has been a recurring theme. In particular, the recent work that many of you in the audience today will be familiar with, and I'm sure we can drop a link in, around the idea of pay what it takes, has thrown up a range of ways philanthropy can move beyond programs to addressing the underlying injustice. What is your research finding on equity, and how might we learn from that?
So good evening, everyone. I think, and John, thanks for bringing up pay what it takes, and the work on equity. I think a couple of points, right? I guess all of us here want to have significant impact, right? And what do you need for significant impact? You, of course, need a very, very inspiring vision, but that vision needs to be supported, in our view, by three things, right? One is a great strategy to get that vision into reality, capital and talent. And where does philanthropy come in? Philanthropy comes in all the three places, but specifically with the capital. Now, in our view, the capital is required for three areas, right? One is building the foundational capabilities of an organization, whether it's your strategy, whether it's IT systems, whether it's HR. The next layer is financial resilience, which is, do you even have 6 months of reserves, right? So funding for corpus, reserves, and stuff like that, right? And of course, I mean, a lot of the funding should rightly go towards, program. What we found both in India and even overseas, that the funders typically have shied away from funding the bottom two layers, which is foundational capabilities and financial resilience. And what has that led to is really organizations underinvesting in these two areas, right? So we did a survey in India and overseas. Pre-COVID, a lot of the organizations and marquee names had less than 3 months of reserves, right? So what does that lead to, right? And why is that happening? Now, couple of things, right? I mean, firstly, as Mr. Munjal said, right? I mean, it's ironic that people are not investing in these two layers, especially the foundational layer, because tell me an organization, tell me of, I'm sure you have heard of organizations where capital was wasted or not efficiently used because it didn't have a clear strategy. Would not investing money in IT systems, as Mr. Munjal said, they did an ERP, on measurements, on learning and evaluation, lead to continuous improvement and efficient utilization of capital. And above all, I mean, in my view, really having a team, a senior leadership team, which is secure that they have funding for the next 2-3 years and are focusing on delivering the impact, will that not significantly improve the impact, right? So I think it's quite ironic that organizations haven't looked at that. Of course, there are new age philanthropies, and some of the old foundations are changing this, right? So that's our whole thesis about the pay what it takes piece, right? And as we did that, We've also looked at organizations that are led by, in the US and elsewhere, people of color, and in India by, people who belong to the DBA communities and say led by women. And I think, we found that surprisingly, these organizations are even worse off, right? So, I mean, this whole piece on equity shows up all across in our work, even in the funding patterns. And I'm happy to talk more about it, in the questions. But I think the whole piece on pay what it takes and equity, the request to funders is focus on a few areas, do your due diligence. I'm not saying throw money, right? Money is very, very important, but then invest deeply in organizations, that you support. And you all do that, Gautam, both as at RNP or the work that, for example, Co-Impact does, where a lot of the funding, in fact, all of it is huge grants and unrestricted grants. So I think, that talking of 2030, we hope to see a lot of funders moving in that direction. Back to you, Gautam.
Thanks so much, Samitra. There are quite a few questions. So I just thought maybe we could dive into those. Deepti, there was one from Itisha which asked, what is missing in the ecosystem and society that will help your foundation create far greater social impact? If I can add another one, if you had a magic wand, what would you ask for?
I think we're speaking about finances, right? I think a large part of impact, the strategy is there, the vision is there, but what you end up doing is fundraising rather than actually working on creating impact. So I feel the magic wand would definitely be funding. But having said that, we've been very fortunate over the last 5 years, especially since CSR came in, because our initial years were really finding people who are passionate about sport. But then when CSR, had put training towards Olympic, Paralympic and rural sports into the mandate, and it became part of nation building, and sport was a very critical aspect of it. I think that in itself opened up so many large corporates who actually came forward and said that this is a long journey and we're with you on this. And we've been fortunate, but obviously that has allowed us to impact to a certain extent. But if you want to really go deeper, you want to really give them world-class support. Today, there's a lot of collaboration with the government. There's a lot of collaboration with the Sports Authority of India. We're all talking to each other. And a large part of the results that you see at Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics is because of these collaborations that have happened. And money that has come in. Corporate India has actually, really given a lot of money. But if you step back and you look at CSR, 1.5% of the total CSR funds available comes into sport. And with that, we've, been able to create this impact. So even if 3 to 5% comes in, you're talking about a lot of athletes who end up doing well and not just winning medals, but qualifying for the Olympics and Paralympics is a very big deal. We've sent our largest contingent both to the Olympics and Paralympics. But what is really important to note is what happens to people who are at a national level, at a state level? What are the kind of skills that they have built, even if they don't ever become an Olympian? I think that is what has been really exciting to unfold through our programs and projects, because when we sit with CSR heads today, we're also looking at the global SDGs, we're talking about livelihood, we're talking about, yes, you do education, but this is education, we're using sport as a vehicle instead of direct education. So we've really had a lot of conversations and learned along the way in terms of how to really position this entire piece, because it's not just sport in the literal sense of high performance. It is junior, emerging, elite. It's a pathway that you're creating, and ultimately it's the pursuit of excellence, right? It is to get to the top. You have so many different challenges that come along the way, and if you're fighting the best in the world who have access to everything possible, why shouldn't we allow our talent to get all the opportunity to excel? So I think that's funding and a lot more people, experts who come in with their time, effort, and their knowledge would be very valuable to us at the foundation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Deepti, for that. Radhika, if I could direct Gaurav's question to you. He asks what goes through the mind of philanthropists when they are deciding their own philanthropic journey, and what can be done to make more philanthropy flow towards more long-term systems change work. The range of interests that you have sit at the intersection of urgent need and long-term necessity. I'm be curious to hear how you straddle those two, the work that is urgent and the work that is long-term and necessary, and in your own journey, how you came to see the necessity of both.
So what is urgent is, with the organization that we work, that I've been part of, the urgent is, are they able to become employable, right? That is, with the disability or with the craft people, it is all about, at the end of the day, are they going to be self-sufficient? And, with the craft community, it is accessibility. It's about design intervention and connecting the gap between what the market demands and what the craftsmen are making. That is urgent. So, I feel everything that we do is urgent because they need to be able to sustain themselves. For me, long term is when we are creating solutions that are sustainable. At the end of the day, I can come up with great solutions, but if I don't have the buy-in of the community that I'm supporting, these are not going to be sustainable solutions. So our philosophy, or what I've learned, in the last few years, is that you need to have conversations with the people that you are working for. And I get to work with a very small group of people, and that's the beauty of that, because a lot of cues come from them, and a lot of ownership. Eventually, when they are sitting on the table and we are coming up with a solution together, the ownership shifts from me to them. And I think that is very important as we get into the line of giving. We need to have equal partnership, and we need to walk with them. I think typically we forget to do that. Typically we think that we have all the solutions and we don't listen. We don't listen enough. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Radhika. I mean, the importance of listening and the importance of curiosity is just something that's so important. Thank you for calling those two out. Samitra, if I could club two questions from you, one from Rajneesh and one from Devika. They're both in the same ballpark, so it would be lovely to hear your reflections on it. Rajneesh asks, what are the leadership challenges faced by individual philanthropists that could restrict their work? I'm guessing they can be both seen and unseen restrictions. And Devika's question was around how have you seen the management or practice of philanthropy evolve in the last decade? And I suppose we could limit that to India for the purpose of this conversation. Sure. I'd love to hear both your thoughts on both.
Thanks. I think both great questions, and I was smiling because last 10 years, a lot has happened in philanthropy in India, right? So, Devika, I think if I look at India, right, I think there's certainly a moment, and a significant moment, and I want to thank Deepti for calling out the CSR contribution. So first is this whole piece on CSR. And the reason I say that is I hear a lot of, and certainly the way CSR giving needs to evolve, will improve and needs to improve. But I think the fact that in the 8 or 9 years, so much ground has been covered by CSR, I think that's one big win, right? And I always tell people, compare it to the first 10 years of, a Rockefeller Foundation, right, in early 1900s, or what Gates did, or what Tata Trust did, right? So I think, these people are just starting out the philanthropic journey. So I think, that's like one big thing. The other, which we've seen, is there's a lot needs to be done, but I think collaborations that are happening in India, and there are multiple. We've written, a paper on that, and recently an op-ed in Hindu written by my colleague Preeta on how they have increased. And I think during COVID, a lot of them came up. The RCRC, the Migrant Resilience Collaborative by Chansas, and many others, 10 to 19, which Dasra has been running for a while, right? So I think, and the third piece is, more innovative ways of giving. I mean, it's been around for a while, as Neil mentioned. it's not only philanthropic capital, but you could have impact capital, you could have debt, and we see that in India with many organizations. I mean, Omidya has been doing that for a while. Dell has been doing that for a while. So I think those are the three big ones. I think, I know you've not asked that, but my wish for 2030 is philanthropists giving more and faster, right? For people who are committed, we've done research, their wealth is growing at a faster rate than they're giving, right? These are people who have committed to philanthropy, right? So two, as I said, quality of capital. And three, Radhika, completely agree with your point on ceding control to philanthropists, to the change makers or the not-for-profits, right? So those are my three wishes for 2030. Now, the first question is actually a very difficult one to answer, because we believe, the ultra high net worth giver and the philanthropist is a segment of one, right? And each of them comes with their own values and principles, like Radhika, and thanks for sharing it very openly. Like she feels, for her, working deeply with a set of, maybe a smaller set, but working deeply with them is what drives her, right? And then we work with a bunch of people, and all of them have very different values. Right now, when you say philanthropist, I'm not talking of foundations. I'm assuming that the wealth creator is alive and is very much involved in giving. I think what we've seen is a couple of things. In the early stages, spreading themselves too thin, which is what we call peanut butter philanthropy, giving small amounts everywhere. Right, that's one piece. And the other piece is around not staying the course. As Deepti said, it's like a 20-year journey to kind of make it, an Olympic champion, right? So depending on the causes you pick up, I think those are the 2-3 things that we see. I know these are not leadership challenges, but I think maybe Gautam can add to it, to it. My sense on leadership challenges in philanthropies where the the donor is alive, involved, and giving is really, how do you build the second line? At what stage you build the second line, and could be the one. But as I said, like we work with 10-15 of these ultra net worth individuals, and the story is very different in each of those.
Thanks, Amita. Fully echo what you were saying, that each journey is a unique one, and there's lots that can be learned across them, but each one is very, very unique. Deepti, if I could come back to you, there's a really interesting question from Diksha that's at the intersection of privilege, social justice, and access. Diksha asks that athletes who come from not privileged backgrounds become unable to keep up. They don't have access to pools. Diksha refers to the example of actor Madhavan's son being trained in Dubai, and that also, for example, women athletes end up with a government job because they don't really have support. How would you respond to the nature of support that we can offer athletes from disadvantaged backgrounds, and bring equitable access to all of them?
I think what's really interesting to see is the backgrounds of all the athletes who've actually made it to the Olympics. There is this understanding, and it was really interesting to see how many state representation we've got from all parts of the country, and also from all backgrounds. Most importantly, if you just take the hockey team, it's incredible to see how that has been. Rani Rampal, who's the captain of the Indian women's hockey team, is somebody who we gave our first scholarship to. She is the daughter of a cart puller, and the daily wage her dad used to earn was 250 rupees, and her first scholarship from us was 6,000 rupees a month. She automatically became the the breadwinner of the family. But after 12 years, she is leading the Indian hockey team. We consciously decided to move out of team sport because we felt it's not fair to only work with 1 or 2 athletes. But in amongst the 135 athletes that we work with today, they come from different backgrounds. And I think for us, and at least the way we select athletes is purely based on talent. You can't really go basis their background only. There are different types of schemes, organizations that work with athletes who come from non-privileged backgrounds. But for us, it is first talent. That would be the differentiator. But if you look at schemes like the Khelo India scheme, you look at the scheme today that the governments have, they are picking up anybody who has the talent gets access. I think gone are those days where you could say that there is no support, there's no help coming in. Today there is information available. If you are a talented athlete, there are enough methods to reach and get support. Yes, it will take some time. You need to be at a state or national level, but definitely if you're there are different organizations who can come forward and help. In terms of swimming, I think that particular case, a lot of people wonder, because he has the privilege, he's going and swimming in Dubai, but we have 4 of our athletes in Dubai as well, training at the same place. So if you are able to do it, why not? If as a protocol in India, swimming pools are closed, there is no other alternative. You have to constantly find what is the next best alternative. So if money could buy us medals, then we would have many medalists. And if money, if hunger was not required to win medals, then Abhinav Mindra would have never won his medal. He does come from a very well-to-do background, but still had the hunger and was India's first Olympic gold medalist. So I think it really comes down to talent and talent meeting opportunity, and really working around the athlete to give them everything for them to succeed. And success can mean so many different things, right? Success can mean a job. I'll just share a quick story actually of Bhavani Devi. She's actually India's first fencer who went to the Tokyo Olympics, and we picked her up about 8 years ago. This is when Rahul Dravid, who's on our board, challenged us saying, go and pick up girls who play alternate sports, go and pick them up from different parts of the country and pick up sports which nobody has even heard and spoken about. And that's when we picked up fencing. She is a temple priest's daughter in Chennai, a government school which actually taught fencing. And today she is at, she was the first Indian to qualify for in fencing at the Tokyo Olympics, now training in France, working towards Paris. But what has happened with that is today at the nationals in fencing, you used to have about 50, 100, 200 people who participate in fencing. That one person actually making it, winning an international medal, qualifying, showing that it is possible. Today you have close to 800,000 kids who participate in fencing nationals or shooting or all the different sports. So I think sometimes it's just that one person who can show that it's possible, and then the entire younger generation is waiting to be inspired. Today everyone's picking up a javelin, and people who didn't know what what really that sport is, they're tracking it. If you saw golf, Aditi Ashok during the Olympics as well, everyone woke up at 4 a.m. People who had no idea about golf as well got up and woke. It is a privileged sport, but at the end of the day, you just need inspiration, you need awareness, and I think a lot of things can happen.
Thanks, Deepti. That's really heartening to hear. I think people often say that we need a diversity of role models so everyone can believe they have a chance. And this is testimony to that. Radhika, there's a really good question from Devika that I'd love to get your thoughts on. She asked on whether you have any thoughts for newer philanthropists or people just getting into organized giving for the first time on how they can do things differently and play a greater role in reducing the inequalities of opportunities that are so deeply entrenched. Would love to hear what.
Young philanthropist, I feel that there is a lot of work that is happening in our country. There are great organizations doing some out-of-the-box solution, solving solutions, coming up with solutions. I don't think we need to keep reinventing new programs. You know what I'm trying to say? I think you need to discover what you really feel strongly about. And there are some great institutions that you can be part of and make it your part of giving. But when for me, when you give, then you stand for that organization, talk about it. I think most of us, I think I have learned when I was volunteering at Delhi Craft Council, I spoke about the craftsmen. I made sure I was wearing a sari. I think we have to walk the talk. Otherwise, I don't think things are going to move. So it's just not about giving that check. I think it's so much more. When you are from a position of privilege, talk about it, do a post, make sure you're taking interest in that organization and give a little bit of time. I think you can give all the money that you can, but I think time and expertise, all NGOs need it. We all need it. We see it all the time. We need people to teach us the art of storytelling so that we can get good funding. We need to understand how important it is to talk from data. There's so much to be done in NGOs. And I think there is a lot that you can do, but you need to figure out what you really feel very passionately about and what you want to move, what do you want to change. You can't change everything. So pick up a cause that you feel strongly about, and there'll be many who would want you to be part of that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That was great, Radhika. And if I can pick up from that, there is so much to be done. Soumitra, to link that to Subrata's question on how do we help Indian philanthropies to appreciate and help building the ecosystem? And I'd widen that question to say to build the entirety of an organization and then the ecosystem. The work that you're doing at Pay What It Takes and beyond speaks a lot to the importance of this. Curious.
So I think, spoken enough, I think, about Pay What It Takes, right? I think the other piece is from an India perspective, right? Is our world, does it even look like a sector, right? Or a field? And my answer, unfortunately, is no, right? And I'll just give an example, not that things could have been changed, but really FCRA and the changes happened upon us and we found it quite late. And I'm just picking up a random industry, say a hosiery manufacturer, they will have an association. They will have a voice. They will have a seat at the table, right? But we who are the voice for, trying to be the voice for the marginalized, for the unheard, where is our own voice, right? And I think, this whole piece is missing. And, this is not our work, but I think, people who are interested, I would, ask them to read, this is an organization called Wings, which talks about infrastructure for philanthropy, right? And I think that piece, Gautam, is missing, right? Where are the watering holes? How do you, get together? How do you learn from each other? Radhika, to your point, if there are, 15 people all over India, young people who are getting into philanthropy for the first time, where do they get together and share ideas? Like if they're in business, there's the, what is called YPF or Young Professionals Forum or whatever, right? There are forums like that, right? Where is the forum for us, right? So I think there, and that report says that 80% of the investment in the infrastructure for philanthropy has happened in North America, right? And that could be in forms of course, professional services organizations like ourselves, members, only clubs like, IPI, they could be academic institutions. ISDM, of course, somebody said is the beginning. So academic institutions and research and stuff like that, right? We thankfully IDR is there, but otherwise, when we started, all my initial work was published in Stanford Social Innovation Review, SSIR, right? And, and we're writing about India and it's going on to SSIR and then Indians are going and reading on SSIR, right? So I think there needs to be investment and effort on building our sector to look like a sector, which has voice, which has fora for people to come together, exchange ideas, and they don't need to necessarily always formally collaborate in terms of investing money or doing things together, but at least sharing of ideas and stuff like that. I think somebody needs to, and some initial, green shoots are there, but I think a lot needs to be done in my view.
Thanks, Soumitra. We're running out of time. We have 3 minutes and 3 panelists and 1 question for each of you. Is there anything we're leaving out here that needs to be addressed? I'd love to hear if there's something that we should talk about next time.
Gautam, sorry, someone had actually asked regarding the whole Paralympic movement, and I think that's very important since we're talking about one of the largest campaigns, human rights campaigns in the world that actually got launched during the Paralympics. Because 15% of the world's population is actually people with disabilities, and India is in the top 5. And what we've seen actually through sport is not just the ability to really transcend human limitations, but also the beliefs in the society that a person with disability is a burden on the family. Today, the fact that they're winning, they've become breadwinners. One of our athletes, for many years, they were trying to get him married. And he won a medal, and then he had so many proposals, and he's like, oh my God, my medal actually allows me to get married, because till then nobody even thought I could get married. So many different beliefs in the society, along the way that have actually helped because, through sport. So just using this platform to really not just assume when we say the word sport, it's always about elite sport and medal sport, though we're working on that path. I think it's important to step back and really see what are all the other aspects on equality, on gender, on livelihood. A lot of different things actually can be taken care through the route of sport. Someone asked that question, and I think it's been very fortunate for us, because we feel like from the start, 13 years ago, we've always worked with both able-bodied athletes and athletes with disabilities. And at Rio, we had 19 athletes. And at Tokyo, we had 54 athletes in the Indian contingent. In a span of less than 4 years, you actually were able to, increase the number of people who actually qualified. And we're seeing the stories that come out of the people with disabilities, the kind of journeys and backgrounds each of them have. I think today they're looking forward to create an identity more than anything else for themselves, through sport. So I just thought I'll pick that one question which didn't get answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Deepthi. Very often progress is hard to see, but in this case, both direction and diversity seems to be going up, and that's phenomenal. Last question, anyone wants to take it? What gives you hope for 2022?
Silence.
I'm very hopeful. I think if I was not hopeful, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. I think what has happened in the last 2 years is that we have seen many conversations, especially in the social sector. There's so many Zoom calls, events. I think we're learning. I think like we're talking about a common platform where one can share, one can learn. I think that is being addressed. And I think many more people, I think pandemic has shown us the stark reality of the differences in our country. And I think that realization has hit many people. So hopefully, I'm hopeful that many more people will give from their heart, give their time, give their money, give their resources and opportunities to ones who need it most. So I'm very hopeful.
Just 5 seconds. For me, it's the young people in the current generation. We had like 2 positions out for consultants. We've got 300, 400 people to apply. And I'm sure it's the same thing with ISDM, right? So I think this generation and their social awareness is what gives me, a lot of hope, not only for 22, but beyond.
That's a wonderful note to leave this on. Thank you so much, Radhika, Deepthi, and Soumitra. Urvi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gautam, Radhika, Soumitra, and Deepthi, for sharing such interesting and diverse ideas and experiences on how philanthropy can be more courageous, how it can generate fresh ideas and test new ways of promoting equity and efficiency in our social programs, and for highlighting that we need a shared infrastructure for philanthropy. We need more data, research, information, dialogues, on learning journeys of philanthropists. We need financial, intellectual, social capital to be invested in many new underserved areas like sports, gender equity, human rights, capacity building of social purpose organizations, talent development, and leadership development in the sector. The discussion has really highlighted some crucial points on how we need a shift from a mindset that's grounded in charity or, just writing checks to one that grounds giving in justice. I'm leaving with lots of new thoughts and lots of ideas that we would be exploring and delving deeper into at the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice moving forward, and hope everyone present here today is as well. I'll now hand over to Trisha Verma, Director of the Global Knowledge Hub at ISDM, who will speak about the Global Knowledge Hub and the launch of the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice, together with Mr. Samar Verma from the Ford Foundation. Over to you, Trisha.
Trisha, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Asim. These 2 days of Target 2030 have made crystal clear the need for bringing in management thinking into the social sector. How we attract and retain top and diverse talent, the criticality of scale, the role of technology in driving social change, the use of data to do it, an evolving approach to the management and practice of philanthropy, all different facets of the discipline that's development management. And as any young discipline, development management needs to be nurtured, strengthened, established, and that's where the Global Knowledge Hub at ISDM comes in. The Global Knowledge Hub is at the heart of ISDM with an intent to disseminate contextual, practice-driven knowledge around how social purpose organizations could be built, led, and managed to deliver sustainable impact at scale, and to catalyze the creation of a whole ecosystem of development management around the world. It's an architecture that holds within it centers focused on knowledge and research, the collation and creation of sector-relevant data, the creation of case studies, the dissemination of knowledge artifacts, and our newest initiative, the Centers of Excellence. Centers of Excellence are incubated to create knowledge and at the same time push the envelope of each domain of development management. They will carry out research, establish an international ecosystem, facilitate learning programs and knowledge exchanges, co-create ideas and frameworks, help build the definitive body of knowledge in that domain, and effectively disseminate it worldwide. And our very first COE is a Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice that Urvi just talked about. It's set up with the support of Ford Foundation. It's an initiative to catalyze the practice of effective philanthropy for social justice and strengthen the broader philanthropic ecosystem locally and globally through knowledge. We have kicked off the center very recently, just a few months ago, with curating and building research on philanthropy for social justice and engaging with key stakeholders. I'd like to request Anushmita to please share with us a video that talks more about what CPSJ is all about.
Philanthropy in India continues to grow, with domestic philanthropic streams expanding rapidly. But India's most vexing social challenges continue to grow at a fast pace too. Indian philanthropy is slowly innovating and diversifying. This growth has, however, been in silos. The bulk of support goes to service delivery type interventions in education, health, sanitation, leaving other deep-rooted issues like human rights, environment, gender equality, livelihoods, and governance with minimum support. And the repercussions are evident across the spectrum. Philanthropy play a greater role in supporting long-term systemic and inclusive change? Does it have the ability to challenge imbalances of social and economic power? Can it empower the marginalized communities? We at the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice believe in a bolder version of philanthropy that addresses systemic causes of intertwined social issues that impact India's most vulnerable in many ways, that focuses on finding and fixing the root cause than alleviating the symptoms. The center seeks to engage with philanthropists, social sector practitioners, scholars, students, the communities in need, and other change makers to catalyze effective philanthropy for creating sustainable impact. We will 1. Curate, create, and disseminate research on effective philanthropy. 2. Design pragmatic tools and learning programs to enhance effectiveness of practitioners. 3. Create partnerships and networks to build a community for philanthropy for social justice. Because as powerful as philanthropy is and has been, it can play an even bigger role in creating a better tomorrow, a truly inclusive one. And every single action counts. Every single opinion matters, and that includes yours.
Thank you, Anusmita. I'd now like to invite Mr. Samar Verma from the Ford Foundation to officially launch the Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice. Samar has over 25 years of multi-sector, multicultural, and multinational work experience in strategic grant making with international donors, leading, undertaking, and managing policy research and analysis in diverse sectors, catalyzing and managing regional collaborative learning networks, and technical capacity building and peer mentoring of think tank leaders. He is a fellow in trade policy from the Harvard Business School and an economics graduate from Hindu College. Over to you, Samar.
Thank you, Trisha. Am I audible?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Trisha. What an amazing video it was. It's a matter of great pride for us at Ford Foundation, and indeed a personal honor to be invited to launch this Center on Philanthropy for Social Justice at the ISDM. The current model of growth has created unprecedented wealth and opportunity in the last century. But as we know, it's done it only for the few. It is time and indeed urgent that we reimagine this paradigm of development towards building a sustainable, inclusive, equitable, and affordable development model which is fit for this century, a point which was so eloquently made by the keynote speaker yesterday, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan. As Mr. Munjal also highlighted a little earlier in his keynote address, a key responsibility for this paradigm reimagination lies with philanthropists. Gautam John has already shared this quote, but it remains a cornerstone and a moral compass for a lot of work we do at the Ford Foundation. So perhaps it's worth repeating. Martin Luther King said that philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. This belief has been at the core of Ford Foundation's mission and philosophy. We have long recognized that effective and meaningful philanthropy is as much about dousing the fire of hunger and poverty today as it is about addressing the deep structural and long-term causes that underlie the systemic poverty and inequality in the first place. As your video very rightly points out, we therefore visualize this center precisely as a catalyst of this practice of effective philanthropy for social justice that strengthens the broader philanthropic ecosystem locally as well as globally through knowledge creation, sharing, education, alliance building, all of which the video very ably highlighted. Thus, in cultivating the shift in the philanthropy from what essentially has been a charity mindset and moving towards what may be called as a justice mindset, ultimately we would like this center to make its contribution towards reimagining that paradigm of development for the 21st century that works for all and which leaves no one behind. This center would eventually, we hope, feed into building and strengthening the voice, agency, and credibility of the philanthropic sector as a whole, something that Mr. Soumitra Pandey was talking about a little bit earlier. Interestingly, and in a very opportune way, being located within the larger ecosystem of teaching in a development management institution as it does, the center also offers a unique opportunity to inform teaching and nurturing of young talent equipped with the values as well as the tools. And values is something that I emphasize more. So values as well as tools to build an equitable, inclusive, and just world where everyone prospers. We know how critical is the role of leadership. I am therefore especially delighted to mention our confidence in the commitment and caliber of the entire leadership of the center, in particular the academic director, Dr. Lata Punamali. I must also say that I've enjoyed working with and have immense confidence in the caliber and the confidence and dedication of Dr. Trisha Verma, Ms. Urvi Shriram, as well as the wider faculty who are associated with the ISDM ecosystem. And in that context, allow me to also make a special mention of Mr. Ravi Sridharan, a founding member of ISDM, for the inspiration and commitment that he brings to the idea of this center. It's an old African saying, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, take others along. The stellar group of huge variety of stakeholders that this ISDM conference, Target 2030, has brought together is a testimony to the commitment to taking everyone along. I personally look forward to being part of this journey that takes us all far and together. I once again congratulate the entire team and its leadership and express my gratitude at the launch of this center, which is perhaps the first and only one of its kind, certainly in this part of the world. With my very best wishes, greetings to all of you. I thank you again for this honor.
Thank you so very much, Samar, for your vote of confidence and your best wishes. We are also very proud to partner with the Ford Foundation for CPSJ. With this, we come to the end of the session on Philanthropy Matters. For people in the audience as well as panelists, please do reach out to us, should you seek to partner or engage in deeper insights into philanthropy. Thank you very much, and back to you, Asi.
Thank you so much, Trisha and Urvi. What feels like the end is often the beginning. We have come to the end of this summit now, but it's likely to spur us on to keep Target 2030 in full view and do what matters today and in the coming years to make our contribution for achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Over the last 2 days, the keynote addresses, panel discussions, CEO talks, announcement of compensation benchmarking survey in the social sector, launch of women on boards, launch of the ISDM Center of Philanthropy for Social Justice with Ford Foundation, etc. had a lot of takeaways for all of us. Some of them have really stayed back with me. Importance of rethinking the development model where social purpose becomes the middle and center of every organization. Second, need for investing in building training programs for leaders in the social sector. Third, need to have an integrated view, development of the society as a whole. Fourth, each one of us needs to look inward and take accountability of what we do in our personal lives to combat social challenges like climate change. Fifth, averages hide true picture. Sixth, make social sector exciting for people. Need to grow brands and organizations in the sector that inspire youngsters to work in the social sector. Seventh, use of technology and data for bringing social change. Eighth, use culture to beat culture. The importance of social behavior change communication. Ninth, punch sutras of engaging and partnering with governments for social good. 10th, diversity, numbers matters. Tokenism, optics, nudge, deliberate action, they matter all. 11th, access and opportunities make all the difference. What can we do about providing these to the underprivileged? 12th, buy-in of the community for creating sustainable solutions, equal partnership, listen to them and walk along with them. 13th, stories of Rani Rampal and Bhavani Devi and support for young athletes at the right time can really do wonders. And the last thing that I captured is forums for philanthropists to come together and sharing of idea can really go a long way in building the philanthropy culture. We hope it was a very enriching experience for all of you over these 2 days with us. An event of this magnitude, you would agree, is not possible to organize without the support of many people, both on stage and backstage. On behalf of ISDM, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speakers, Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan, Ms. Vrinda Sarup, and Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal. All the panelists, the anchors, the delegates, the partners, the students, the alumni, and other attendees who traveled with us on these 2 days. A big shout out to the conference chair, Ms. Anushmita Bodolai, and the entire ISDM staff who put all of this together. We hope to continue our journey at ISDM to engage in dialogues on development management for the achievement of sustainable development goals, and in turn, a just, equitable, humane, and sustainable world for us all. For those of you who were not able to join the earlier sessions, or if you want to relive the highlights from this one, please note they will be available on ISDM's YouTube channel within a few hours. Thanks once again for joining in and for your continued support to ISDM so that we are able to mainstream development management and make the social sector an aspirational destination for young professionals. We will see you next year with another round of Target 2030 and continue this conversation on development management and sustainable development goals. Bye for now. Stay safe, everyone.